Chapter 412. Go to watch net. Li Yundong and Su Chong quickly went downstairs. Sure enough, they saw Zhou Ping and Zhang Ling standing at the door in their Taoist robes. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He slowed down and walked over slowly. Watch net. 7K. OM. Most of the people sitting in the tea room on the first floor were students, Li Yundong's friends, Lu Feier, and the others. When they saw the two Taoist nuns standing at the door, they all turned their heads to look at them curiously. Only Zhou Qin, Zi Yuan, and Ruan Hongling looked at them nervously. Lu Feier held a cup of tea and looked at Zhang Ling and Zhou Ping curiously. She whispered, "Why are there still Taoist priests begging for alms now?" Lu Feier's mind was relatively simple. She didn't notice the vigilance and hostility of Li Yundong, Zi Yuan, Zhou Qin, and the others. But Chao Kefi was a clever person. She keenly captured the smell of gunpowder. Chao Kefi winked at Lu Feier and whispered, "Don't talk, there will be a good show later." Lu Feier asked curiously, "It's just two Taoist priests, what's so good about them?" As she spoke in a low voice, she suddenly saw Zhang Ling turn her head and glance at her. This glance was not very sharp, but when it landed on Lu Feier's face, she immediately swallowed all the words she was about to say. Her heart thumped wildly, as if a hand was pressing down on her chest, making it hard for her to breathe. At this time, Li Yundong had already walked downstairs. Feng Na turned her head and saw Li Yundong. She smiled and said, "Li Yundong, there are two Taoist priests here to beg alms. Do you want to?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "They're not here to beg for alms." As he said this, he cupped his hands and said to Zhang Ling and Zhou Ping in a deep voice, "Zhenren Zhang, what brings you here today?" Zhou Ping stood to one side and didn't say anything, which was rare. She just stared at Li Yundong with an unfriendly gaze. Zhang Ling, who was next to her, formed a palm with one hand and said, "Amateus Zhenren Li, how have you been since we parted on Mount Gazao?" Li Yundong also returned the salute and said lightly, "Zhenren Zhang, you are still as elegant as ever. I wonder why you have the time to visit my store today." The people around them saw Li Yundong and Zhang Ling saluting and speaking in a genteel manner, just like ancient people. They all felt strange and looked at them curiously. Zhang Ling glanced around faintly and said, "I heard that Zhenren Li has opened a tea house. As fellow Taoists, how can I not come to celebrate?" Li Yundong's heart trembled. He cupped his hands and said, "Zhenren Zhang, you're too polite. I don't deserve it. It's just that there are so many distinguished guests here. I wonder how Zhenren Zhang wants to celebrate." Zhang Ling suddenly smiled and said meaningfully, "Zhenren Li, since you dared to show your sword in public just now, you must be very confident in your magic cultivation, right?" Li Yundong's eyes narrowed slightly, but he soon smiled and pretended to be stupid. "What do you mean by showing your sword in public?" Taoist Zhang's words sound really strange. Zhou Ping, who was standing to one side, couldn't help but shout in a low voice, "Li Yundong, don't pretend to be confused. Just now, you dared to show your powerful magical weapon in front of the secretary of the provincial party committee. Are you tired of living?" Li Yundong glanced at her indifferently. "I don't understand what you're saying either." Zhang Ling snorted and also lowered her voice. "Zhenren Li, it's fine if you play with fire, but don't get us involved." Li Yundong drawled and said, "Oh? What do you mean?" Zhang Ling said coldly, "Don't use magic in front of secular mortals. This is the iron law of our cultivation world. Don't you know that?" Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "Is that so? Why do I remember that we can't let secular mortals see us using magic? Besides you, did anyone else notice anything just now?" Zhang Ling looked at Li Yundong coldly. Her eyes didn't blink, and her expression was very unfriendly. Li Yundong was also secretly vigilant, and his whole body was covered with jinqi. At this time, Feng Na and the others also noticed that there was something wrong between Zhang Ling and Li Yundong. Although they didn't know what Li Yundong and Zhang Ling had said, they could see that the two of them were about to fight. Feng Na said to Zhou Qin nervously, "Hey, what's going on? Are these two Taoist priests looking for trouble? Hurry up and call the police." Zhou Qin was even more nervous than Feng Na, but after all, she was the daughter of a rich family and had seen many big scenes. she said calmly in a low voice. It's okay. With Li Yundong here, nothing will happen. At this time, Lu Feier also grabbed Chao Kefi's arm and said with some fear that the world would not be in chaos. Hey, sure enough, it seems that they are going to fight. Wow, as a master, you won't even hit a woman, will you? Chao Kefi's expression was strange. Although she felt uncomfortable in her heart, she still defended Li Yundong and said, Li Yundong is not such a person. However, you have to know that some women in this world really deserve a beating. At this time, Yin Mengfan, who was standing to one side, turned around and glared at them. Don't be so noisy. I can't hear them. The two women immediately shut up and continued to look at Li Yundong and the others with great interest. Zhang Ling stared at Li Yundong for a long time. Suddenly, she burst out laughing and said, Jinren Li is really skilled and bold. Good, I admire you. Since you said so, I'd like to try Jinren Li's ability to fight in public. Li Yundong's eyes suddenly showed a sharp look. He said coldly, Jinren Zhang, today is the opening ceremony of Desanxian. Do you have to make trouble today? Zhang Ling snorted coldly. Jinren Li, I think you are mistaken. Before you showed your sword in public, I didn't want to come to you. But since you dared to show your powerful magical weapon in public, it means that you are very confident in your ability to fight in public. Then, any cultivator around can challenge you for the purpose of maintaining the laws of the cultivation world. Otherwise, if you are not discovered this time, what will you do if you are discovered next time? Li Yundong frowned. He tilted his head slightly and whispered to Ziyuan. Is there such a rule? Ziyuan also quickly whispered. Yes. There is an unwritten rule in the cultivation world. If any cultivator uses magic treasures or magic in public in a busy city, then all the cultivators who see it have the right to stop it. The purpose is to prevent people from maliciously publicizing magic treasures and magic treasures in the cultivation world to the world, causing chaos in the world, and attracting the vigilance and suppression of the government. Li Yundong nodded slightly. Seeing that he couldn't avoid this battle, he simply calmed down and said in a deep voice, Well, how do you want to fight, Jinren Zhang? How about we find a remote place where there is no one? Zhang Ling smiled. She looked around and said, Why do we need to find a place where there is no one? Since Taoist Zhang dares to show off his magic weapon in front of so many people, then why don't we compete according to the convention of the cultivation world? Let's see who is the first to be discovered by the surrounding people, and who loses. At this time, Ziyuan whispered in Li Yundong's ear. This is a battle between great cultivators. Often relying on their profound Taoist magic, they often do something bold and skillful. They use magic and powerful magical weapons in public in front of the world, but they don't let them see the mystery of it. They only think that it is a magic trick. But if one of them is destroyed by the other, or if the mystery is discovered by the world, then it will be considered as the loser. Li Yundong smiled gratefully at Ziyuan and nodded. I understand, he said to Zhang Ling. In that case, how should we fight? Zhang Ling pondered for a moment, but before she could speak, she suddenly heard an old man's voice. Haha, what a coincidence. It turns out that Jinren Zhang is also here. When they heard the voice, they looked in the direction of the voice and saw an old man wearing a Taoist robe, with a slender Taoist nun beside him. They were walking quickly. When Li Yundong saw them, he immediately frowned. These two people were none other than Zheng Yuan and Ding Nan. Zheng Yuan's face was flushed and kind. People who didn't know him well would feel close to him when they saw his face. Ding Nan, who was next to him, was wearing a Taoist robe for the first time. Although the robe was loose and covered her slim figure, her face was like a peach blossom, and she was tall. Wearing the Taoist robe made her even more attractive. Li Yundong took a deep look at Ding Nan and said in a deep voice, What are you doing here? Ding Nan smiled slightly and said, Li Yundong, you and I are classmates. I heard that you opened a shop here. As a classmate and fellow Taoist, I came to congratulate you. Don't you welcome me? Zheng Yuan also smiled kindly and said, My beloved disciple is really nostalgic. She insisted on coming here, and I couldn't stop her. Jinren Li, you can't be so unreasonable, can you? Li Yundong snorted. Just as he was about to speak, he heard a surprised voice coming from not far away. Hey Leader Zhang, you're here too? Jinren Zhang, you're here too? Everyone looked over and saw that Du Fei of the Chuanjin dragon sect was also wearing a Taoist robe. He was looking at Li Yundong and the others in surprise. Li Yundong was also surprised. Jinren Du, why are you here? Du Fei's face was full of smiles. He bowed and said, Amateus Jinren Li, you opened a shop without telling me. It's obvious that you don't treat me as a friend, so I had to come uninvited. Li Yundong smiled bitterly in his heart. I just don't want the cultivation world to get involved in this, so I want to keep a low profile. Now, both those who should come and those who shouldn't have come are here. Ziyuan seemed to know what Li Yundong was thinking. She said in a low voice, Li Yundong, you are a cultivator. Since you chose to open a shop in the downtown area, it's impossible to avoid being disturbed by fellow Taoists. You should be aware of this and be mentally prepared. Su Chan also grabbed Li Yundong's arm and whispered, Yundong, I'm sorry. I've caused you trouble again. Li Yundong glanced at Ziyuan and smiled at her. Then he patted Su Chan's head and said with a smile, Silly girl, don't be silly. Even if you don't cause me trouble, trouble will come to me. Zhang Ling, who was standing to one side, nodded lightly to Zheng Yuan and Du Fei as a greeting. She said, Since Jinren Du and Leader Zheng are here, you can be witnesses. Leader Zheng and Du Fei asked in unison, What witnesses? While they were talking, Lu Feier, Chao Kefi, and Yin Mengfan, who were in the tea house, were craning their necks to listen to their conversation. Lu Feier said, Hey, I heard them say the word witness. What did you hear? Yin Mengfan said with a strange expression, I didn't hear it clearly. It's too noisy here, especially upstairs. There are even people playing finger-guessing games. Do they really think this tea house is a restaurant? Chao Kefi also sighed. I only heard something about a real person or a fake person. I didn't hear anything else clearly. Lu Feier blinked. Why don't we just go over and listen to what they're saying? Chao Kefi hesitated for a moment. That's not good. Don't you see that they are all Taoist priests? Maybe they have something to do. Lu Feier pouted and said unhappily, It's really annoying. They asked me to see a master, but I didn't see a master. I only saw a group of stinky officials and a group of stinky Taoist priests. As soon as she finished speaking, Chao Kefi and Yin Mingfan widened their eyes and looked outside the door. They saw a luxurious Mercedes-Benz slowly driving in. Two young men and a woman got out of the Mercedes-Benz. The man was handsome, but his eyes were a little lecherous. The woman had a baby face, but her figure was particularly hot and sexy. Yin Mingfan said, Isn't that the young master of the Shen family and Shen Hui? Why are they here? When Li Yundong saw the two of them, he suddenly felt a headache coming on. He complained to himself, Why are these two lawless guys here? It's getting more and more lively. Well, a spoiler. The girl on the cover is Su Chan. Previous chapter, next chapter recommendation, previous page, return to the table of contents, next page, error report if you like. Please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your views. Chapter 413. Go to watch net. Shen Yu and Shen Hui got out of the car. They looked at the tea house of Desangxian and showed disdainful expressions at the same time. However, when an old man behind them got out of the car, they pretended to appreciate and praise it at the same time and kept nodding and commenting. Go to watch net. The old man was Shen Wankai. He glanced at Shen Hui and Shen Yu, who were pretending. He snorted and said, Stop pretending. Can you two idiots understand the mystery of calligraphy? Shen Yu snorted and turned his head away, looking disapproving. However, Shen Hui stamped her feet angrily and said to Shen Wankai, Old master, how can you say that to me in front of so many people? Shen Wankai snorted and said, What else can I say? Look at him. He started from scratch at such a young age. And look at yourself. What else can you do except cause trouble all day long? As he spoke, he ignored the two of them and took the lead to walk toward the tea house of Desangxian. Shen Hui was so angry that she gritted her teeth and glared at Li Yundong, as if she were looking at an enemy. Shen Yu, who was beside her, suddenly came over and said with a smile, "Little sister, why don't we go together?" Shen Hui immediately turned her head and shouted at him, "Get out of here. Who wants to go with you?" As she said this, she immediately chased after Shen Wankai. Shen Yu's face was extremely ugly. He stood there for a while with a gloomy expression, then followed her. Shen Wankai glanced around quickly. When he saw Zi Yuan and Li Yundong, he immediately laughed and greeted them happily. He said to Zi Yuan, "Miss Zi Yuan, last time we parted in Dongwu City, I was in such a hurry that I didn't have time to say a few words to you. This time, I heard that you opened a tea house in Tiannan City, so I came uninvited to pay my respects." Zi Yuan smiled slightly, turned sideways, spread out her palm, pointed at Li Yundong and said, "It's not me who opened the tea shop. The owner is Li Yundong. Mr. Shen should congratulate him." Shen Wankai chuckled. He looked at Zi Yuan meaningfully, and then at Li Yundong. He said, "Congratulations. Child Li is young and promising. At such a young age, you have opened an extraordinary tea house. Amazing, amazing." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Not at all. We opened this tea house together. It's definitely not my credit alone. CEO Shen, you have also contributed to this." Shen Wankai asked curiously, "Oh, what do you mean?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "If you hadn't awarded the first place to Zi Yuan last time, our tea house wouldn't have been able to open. Therefore, CEO Shen, you deserve the most credit." Shen Wankai laughed out loud and said, "Miss Zi Yuan deserved the first place last time. I was just handling it impartially. But in this case, it was right for me to come uninvited." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Mr. Shen, you're too polite. It's an honor for Desangxian to have you here. Please come in." Chen Wankai looked at Zhang Ling and the others beside Li Yunyang with a smile. Seeing that they were wearing Taoist robes, he asked curiously, "Are they begging for alms?" Zhou Ping glared at him rudely. "You're the one begging for alms. We are just—" Before she could finish speaking, Zhang Ling stopped her, glared at her, and then said lightly, "Are you Mr. Shen of the Wankai group?" Shen Wankai saw that although Zhang Ling's appearance was ordinary, her gaze was deep and her eyes were bright. The cinnabar red mole between her eyebrows was especially eye-catching, making her look extraordinary and definitely not an ordinary person. Chen Wankai was surprised in his heart. He asked, "I'm Chen Wankai. May I ask who you are?" Zhang Ling smiled faintly and said, "It doesn't matter who I am, but I heard that you are not only a business genius, but also an elegant person, so I want to ask you to be a notary. How about that?" Chen Wankai asked curiously, "What notary?" Zhang Ling pointed at Li Yundong and said, "Jinren Li and I have agreed to perform a few small tricks, so I want to ask you to be a notary to see who wins and who loses." Chen Wankai asked curiously, "Small tricks? Jinren Li?" He looked at Li Yundong and said with a smile, "Is Child Li also a cultivator?" Li Yundong cupped his hands in obeisance and said with a smile, "Sorry to make you laugh, Mr. Shen." Chen Wankai laughed and corrected himself. "I was wondering why Jinren Li looked so extraordinary and didn't look like an ordinary person. It turns out that he is a member of the Taoist sect." He turned to look at Zi Yuan and said, "So Miss Zi Yuan is also a Taoist?" Zi Yuan bowed and said, "Yes." Chen Wankai turned his head and glanced at Xin Yu and Xin Hui. He thought to himself, "I originally wanted to find 2 teachers for these 2 good-for-nothings, so I took the initiative to come here. On the one hand, I wanted to see how their tea house was like, and on the other hand, I wanted to show my sincerity. But I didn't expect them to be Taoist priests. If I invited them to be teachers, wouldn't it be a little inappropriate?" Chen Wankai thought quickly, but he soon thought, "Since I'm here, I might as well take things as they come. It's good to see them perform some small tricks." He just didn't know if the tea ceremony last time was also a magic trick. Thinking of this, Chen Wankai laughed and said to Zhang Ling, "I don't have any other hobbies, but I like to uphold justice. Well, I'll be the notary. Where are you going to perform the trick?" Zhang Ling looked around and said lightly, "Let's do it in the hall downstairs. Jinren Li, what do you think?" Zhang Ling looked at Li Yundong with a hint of provocation in her eyes. Li Yundong smiled slightly. Okay. As you wish, Xunren Zhang. Du Fei, who was standing to one side, saw that Li Yundong and Zhang Ling were about to fight. He frowned secretly, then suddenly smiled and said, Xunren Li, I'll also be a witness. How about that? Li Yundong glanced at him. For a moment, he didn't know what this jade-faced golden monkey was up to. He was a little hesitant. Just as he was hesitating, he saw Du Fei turn around and say to him in a low voice, Xunren Zhang is good at 19 kinds of great shintong and 43 kinds of small shintong. Xunren Li, be careful, especially her 5 ghosts technique and the fairy descending to the world. Zi Yuan also sent a voice transmission to Li Yundong. Although the Chuanjin Dragon sect and the Jingyi school are polite on the surface, in fact, they seem to be united, but are actually divided. They are secretly competing with each other. Li Yundong, you might as well let Du Fei be a notary. He needs our help now, so he shouldn't be secretly hindering us. Moreover, if Chun Wankai makes a wrong judgment, he can help you correct it. Although Li Yundong secretly wondered what the 5 ghosts technique and the fairy descending to the world were, he already had an idea in his heart. He smiled and said, Well, since Xunren Du is so warm-hearted, I'll have to trouble you. After he finished speaking, Zheng Yuan also smiled and said, In that case, I'll also join in the fun and be a notary. What do you think? Li Yundong frowned and looked at Zheng Yuan unkindly. He didn't say anything, but Zhang Ling pondered for a moment and said, Well, since Xunren Du has become a notary, Leader Zheng should also be a notary. Zheng Yuan laughed and said, Well, Xunren Zhang is really straightforward. I wonder what trick Xunren Zhang and Xunren Li are going to compete in the first round. Zhang Ling said lightly, There are too many people here, so I can't show it. Let's play a little trick. As she said this, she said to Li Yundong, Xunren Li, please bring a table, a teacup, and an opaque cover. Li Yundong turned his head and was about to give an order to Su Chan, but he saw that the little girl had already run to the opposite side and moved another table over. Zhou Qin turned around and took a teacup and a large teapot from the storage room. At this time, everyone upstairs and downstairs noticed the movement below. Some of them were curious, so they went to the railing on the second floor and looked down. Li Yuanbua and the others were sitting next to the railing, drinking tea while watching the movement downstairs. Mayor Zeng of Tianan City laughed and said, Haha, there are actually tricks to watch. Xiao Li's opening ceremony is a bit original. Not bad, not bad. Young people nowadays are creative and promising. Although Mayor Zeng was joking, he was actually secretly trying to get close to Li Yuanbua. As a person who had been in politics for a long time, he could certainly see that Li Yuanbua was close to Zhou Qin, and he could also see that Zhou Qin was close to Li Yundong. Therefore, flattering Li Yundong in a roundabout way was also good for him, to get close to the leader. How could Li Yuanbua not understand this? He glanced at Mayor Zeng, chuckled and said noncommittally, After all, young people like to play. This sentence made Mayor Zeng a little confused. He thought to himself, is he praising Li Yundong or belittling him? Just as he was thinking about it, Lu Feier also took Chao Kefi's arm and whispered, Hey, Sister Chao, what kind of tricks do you think they will perform later? Chao Kefi stared at the field and shook her head. I don't know. Anyway, there will be a good show later. Lu Feier said curiously and expectantly, Will it be magic? Can Li Yundong do magic? Chao Kefi burst into laughter. He is not Lu Qian. Just pay attention to him later. He won't let you down. At this time, Zhang Ling looked at the square table in front of her. She gently patted the corner of the table with her palm, causing it to slide 2 meters away. Then she said, Please ask the notary to check the teacup and teapot to see if they are ordinary teacups and teapots. Chun Wankai didn't know how they were going to compete, and felt strange in his heart. But he still went forward to take a closer look at the teacup and teapot. He knocked them up and down, and even reached into the teapot to touch it. He said, No problem, they are ordinary teacups and teapots. Zhang Ling then said to Du Fei and Zheng Yuan, Zhenren, please check them. Du Fei smiled and said, No need. Zhang Yuan also laughed. Why do we need to check? Zhang Ling turned her face and said lightly to Li Yundong. Zhenrenli, although this is your tea set, do you want to check it? Li Yundong was full of doubts. Li Yunyang was full of doubts. He didn't know how Zhang Ling was going to fight with him in front of so many people, without being noticed. He frowned slightly and said, No, Zhenren Zhang, how do you want to compete? And how do you want to decide the winner? Zhang Ling smiled faintly, as if she was performing a magic trick. A horsetail whisk suddenly appeared in her hand. Then with a shake of her arm, the horsetail whisk hit the bottom of the tea table with a bang. The teacup on the tea table jumped up, and the lid of the teapot also jumped up. The teacup flipped over, and just as the lid of the teapot jumped up, it fell into the teapot next to it, making a crisp sound. Her kung fu was elegant and beautiful, and it immediately attracted cheers from all over the tea house. Chen Wansai's eyes couldn't help but light up. He was worried that the teacup would fall into the teapot and break. So he went forward and opened the lid of the teapot to take a look. He saw that the teacup had fallen right in the middle of the teapot, without any damage. Chen Wankai immediately raised his head, gave Zhang Ling a thumbs up, and said loudly, What a good kung fu! I admire you. As he said this, he took 3 steps back and looked at the field with bright eyes. Shen Yu and Shen Hui looked at each other. Although they were very disdainful of Li Yundong, they were young after all, and it was inevitable for them to love fun. Therefore, they looked at the field curiously, wanting to see how Li Yundong and Zhang Ling were going to perform this trick. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Vote recommendation. Previous page. Return to table of contents. Next page. Error report. If you like, please click here to add Raising a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Raising a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Raising a Fox at Home, please click here to express your personal views. Chapter 414. Go to Watch Net. On the first day of the opening of Desangxian's tea house, the upper and lower floors were full of celebrities from all walks of life. There were business beauties like Yin Mengfan and Chao Kefi, film and television stars like Lu Feier, senior political officials like Li Yuanbua, and billionaires like Shen Wankai. Go to Watch Net. With so many people gathered together, and their eyes fixed on one place, Li Yundong was going to fight in public in front of so many celebrities. It would be a lie to say that he was not nervous at all. At present, Zhang Ling said it politely, and said that it was a trick in public. But in fact, this behavior was no different from challenging the dojo. If he lost, although the mortals around him could not see anything, the cultivation world would immediately spread the news. On the first day of opening, he had failed in a battle. This was tantamount to being slapped in the face in public, which was a great shame. Li Yundong knew that he absolutely could not lose, and there was no way out. However, he had only cultivated for a little more than half a year. In private one-on-one battles, his strength was extremely tyrannical, and there were few cultivators of the younger generation who could match him. However, fighting in public was different from fighting in private. Li Yundong's cultivation time was still short, so how could he know the mystery of fighting in public? He was secretly a little vigilant and awe-inspiring. But he heard Zhang Ling say in a clear voice, Li Yundong and I will do a little trick. Please watch carefully. As she said that, she pointed at the big teapot and said, Just now, everyone saw that there is a small teacup in the big teapot. What I'm going to do is to make the teacup disappear without getting close to the teapot. And what Li Yundong needs to do is to find a way to change the teacup back. If he can change it back, I lose. If he can't, I win. As soon as she said this, the people upstairs and downstairs were suddenly surprised and whispered to each other with great interest. This trick is a little interesting. If you don't get close, how can it disappear? Could it be that there's nothing inside? That's impossible. Didn't Shen Wankai see it just now? No one approached it just now. Lu Feier also asked curiously, Sister Chao, if you don't get close, how can the teacup inside disappear? Chao Kefi also frowned and shook her head. I don't know. If I knew, I would have gone to the Spring Festival Gala. Yin Mengfan said in a low voice, Don't say any more. Just watch. Who knows if it will disappear? After hearing Zhang Ling's words, Li Yundong was also surprised and thought to himself, what kind of fight is this? Wasn't this just like magic? It was really a magic trick. Just as he was wondering, Zhang Ling flicked her horsetail whisk and threw out a talisman. The talisman had strange patterns drawn on it. It hung in the air without moving or falling. After a while, it slowly burned to ashes. At this time, the people who were watching the show outside the arena were surprised and sighed. The corners of Zhang Ling's mouth curled up, revealing a hint of pride. She flicked her horsetail whisk over the teapot and said, I've already taken the teacups inside. The crowd exclaimed, and many people hurriedly asked, President Shen, quickly check if the teacup is still there. Only then did Shen Wangkai come to his senses. He walked over to the teapot, opened the lid, and looked inside. At this time, Shen Yu, Shen Hui, Lu Feier, Chao Kefi, and the others, who were closer to the table, also unconsciously stretched out their heads and looked into the teapot. When they saw it, they were stunned. The teapot was empty. Not to mention the teacup, there was not even a hair. They stared blankly and said in a daze, It's gone. The teacup is gone. The crowd suddenly burst into an uproar and said one after another, No way. Let me see. At this time, although many people upstairs were high-ranking officials and celebrities, they couldn't hold back at this time. They rushed downstairs and looked at the teapot. Only then did they believe it. They all looked at Zhang Ling with their eyes wide open, shook their heads secretly and marveled. Incredible. It's really amazing. How did you do it? However, Zhang Ling lowered her eyes, as if she hadn't seen them at all. She remained silent. These people who had asked questions had no choice but to return to their seats and whisper to each other. For a time, there was a lot of noise upstairs and downstairs. Most of them were discussing how Zhang Ling had made the teacup in the teapot disappear. At this time, Li Yundong was also dumbfounded. He had only cultivated for a short time, so he didn't understand what was going on at all. He cursed in his heart and thought, Damn it, I don't even understand it. How can I fight with her later? Where did she put the teacup? How would I know? Not only him, but Su Chan and the members of the Fox Zen school were also staring blankly and helpless. Su Chan had been cultivating since she was a child, so she hadn't seen any clues, let alone Zhou Qin. She was secretly anxious and kept looking at Li Yundong. Even Wan Hongling, who came from a famous righteous sect, didn't understand the mystery at all. She frowned and said to Ziyuan via voice transmission, Sister Ziyuan, what's going on? Why can't I understand it? At this time, Ziyuan secretly frowned and also said via voice transmission, It's normal. Those who dare to fight in public and are not afraid of ordinary people seeing through the mystery are all top cultivators. Their techniques and magic are extremely magical. Not to mention you. Even I don't understand it. As she spoke, her heart suddenly moved. She looked at the talisman that was still hanging in the air. With this look, a smile suddenly appeared on the corner of her mouth. Ziyuan quickly sent a voice transmission to Li Yundong and said, Li Yundong, the talisman in front of you is the goddess Nyan seal, which is also the invisibility talisman. Just now, Zhang Ling must have released her yang spirit and used the invisibility talisman to hide it from the world. At the moment when the yang spirit took the teacup out of the teapot, the yang spirit turned into Yin spirit, passed through the teapot, and took the teacup. You saw Zhang Ling flick her horsetail whisk just now to attract the attention of the people around her and cover up the moment when the teacup was taken out. Li Yundong suddenly understood. Just as he was about to turn his head and speak to Ziyuan, he heard her voice transmission again. Don't turn your head, or it will be regarded as cheating. In a moment, you release the yang spirit, and I will release the goddess Nyan seal. Then, you use the yang spirit to hit the talisman floating in front of Zhang Ling. Once the talisman is destroyed, her yang spirit will definitely be exposed, and she will have to take it back. Once the yang spirit is taken back, the teacup will automatically appear. After hearing Ziyuan's words, Li Yundong nodded very slightly, indicating that he had understood. At this time, Ziyuan said via voice transmission. I will count to 3, and we will do it at the same time. In a while, I will stick the talisman on your sleeve. The moment you release the yang spirit, you will throw out the talisman and stick it on the yang spirit. At this time, Ziyuan stood behind Li Yundong. With a flip of her 5 fingers, she took out a talisman from her sleeve. Using Li Yundong's figure as a cover, she quickly drew a goddess Nyan seal, and then she said via voice transmission, 1, 2, 3. When she counted to 3, Li Yundong instantly released his yang spirit. At the same time, Ziyuan quickly stuck the talisman on Li Yundong's sleeve. Li Yundong swung his arm at the same time, and the talisman immediately hung in front of him, just hanging on his yang spirit. Li Yundong and Ziyuan had an excellent tacit understanding. It was almost as if one person was casting magic. At this time, no one upstairs and downstairs could see any flaws. They only felt that Li Yundong's body shook slightly, and then he also threw out a talisman like Zhongling. It was also suspended in the air, and did not fall to the ground. After a while it was burned to ashes. Although they saw that Li Yundong's technique was the same as Zhongling's, they were all excited, and wanted to see how Li Yundong would change the teacup back. Only Zhongling secretly frowned and gave Ziyuan, who was behind Li Yundong, a meaningful look. After Li Yundong's yang spirit went out of his body, although he couldn't see Zhongling's yang spirit in front of him, he knew that Zhongling couldn't see his yang spirit either. He secretly made a handprint, a fixed fundamental mudra, and suddenly chopped toward Zhongling. Li Yundong's invisible yang spirit made a mahamudra, and everyone felt a sudden movement in the air. Then, there was a sudden loud bang in the tea house, as if someone's palms had hit each other, causing the air to tremble. Especially the people on the first floor. They only felt that there was an invisible wave of qi in the air rushing toward them, making them suffocate. Li Yundong's mahamudra was blocked, and he immediately became spirited, because he knew that Zhongling's yang spirit was really in front of him, as Ziyuan had said. He immediately controlled his yang spirit to rush forward, and at the same time, he quickly made a Mahavarakana mudra with both hands, and slapped toward Zhongling. Li Yundong's mahamudra was blocked, and he immediately felt a strong wind in front of him. When the two forces intersected, Li Yundong vaguely saw a woman in gorgeous clothes standing in front of him. He couldn't see the woman's appearance clearly, but Li Yundong could clearly feel that the belt on her body was like a steel whip and iron chain, whipping toward his yang spirit body. Li Yundong stepped back. After making a mahamudra, he immediately blocked the direction of the strong wind with both hands. With this block, the yang spirits of the two people suddenly came into contact, and both of them instantly saw each other's yang spirits. Li Yundong was shocked. He thought that both of their yang spirits had been exposed. His heart trembled, and his yang spirit was also affected. He hesitated for a moment. As he hesitated, Zhongling's yang spirit immediately tied Li Yundong up like countless fairy-tied ropes. In the blink of an eye, he was tightly tied up. Li Yundong was shocked. He wanted to struggle, but he was afraid that the movement would become louder and louder. If he didn't struggle, he would definitely lose. Just as he was in a dilemma, he heard Ziyuan's urgent voice transmission. Li Yundong, don't worry. You haven't been exposed. When the two Nyan goddess seals touch each other, they will offset each other's invisibility. But this is only for two cultivators with Nyan goddess seals. Others can't see it. Hurry up and run outside. This place is narrow, and it's suitable for Zhongling, not for you. When Li Yundong heard this, he immediately had an idea. He immediately used his yang spirit strength, and rushed out of the door like a violent bull. Zhongling's yang spirit, who was tied up by Li Yundong's belt, was also forcibly dragged out, and the two of them flew into the air. As soon as Li Yundong flew into the air, he was like a dragon swimming in the sea, and a tiger entering the mountains. He no longer had any scruples. With a loud shout, his junqi surged out, and his yang spirit body rapidly and violently expanded. In just a moment, he had become an iron arhat more than 3 meters tall. Chapter 415. Go to watch net. Li Yunyang's yang spirit continued to grow, and Zhang Ling's yang spirit was suddenly shocked. Her expression turned cold as she said coldly, "It's really rare to see someone who can cultivate to your level at such a young age." At this time, Li Yundong was looking at Zhang Ling's yang spirit in the air. He saw that she was extremely beautiful and ethereal, like a fairy in the heavenly palace. He sneered and said, "Your yang spirit is very beautiful. Is it to make up for your lack of beauty?" There was a flash of anger in Zhang Ling's eyes, but soon she burst out laughing again. "The body is just a bag of skin. We cultivators cultivate the yang spirit body. The yang spirit is the most valuable thing to cultivate. Only the yang spirit can overcome life, old age, illness and death, but the body can't. Li Yundong, you've made such a big name for yourself, but you can't see through this? What's so good about this stinky body of mine? Moreover, the yang spirit body represents your original God spirit, and it was not deliberately created by me. If you don't even understand this, how can you cultivate?" Zhang Ling shouted, "My original deity is the fairy of the ninth heaven. Li Yundong, you are no match for me. Surrender." After saying that, Zhang Ling's quintessential essence surged and his body shook slightly. After a while, he split from one person to two, and then from 2 to 4. Watch net. 7K. OM. Li Yundong was shocked. He saw Zhang Ling's yang spirit attacking from all directions. It was difficult for his 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. For a moment, it was difficult for him to defend himself, and he was exhausted. "Damn it, what kind of spell is this? If you have the ability, fight me one-on-one." Li Yundong gritted his teeth and roared loudly. Zhang Ling controlled her 4 doppelgangers, and beat Li Yundong until he had no room to fight back. She laughed and said, "Li Yundong, the Shentong magic of our Zhuni school is mysterious and can change at will. How can a beginner like you understand it?" He suddenly remembered that when he had just cultivated to the Yangshan phase, and the Yangshan had left his body, he and Su Chan had been laughing and playing in the room. He had changed from a child to a teenager, and then to a young man. He had changed as he pleased. It could be said that he could become as big as he wanted, as long as his Junshi could support it. At this moment, Li Yundong suddenly felt as if a door in his mind had been pushed open by someone, and he had entered a new world. Things that he hadn't understood in the past suddenly became clear to him. When Li Yundong first started cultivating, he had always felt that cultivation was very unreliable, because the purpose of cultivators was to get rid of old age, illness, and death. They wanted to jump out of the inevitable laws of nature and reach the realm of immortality. However, the more cultivation books he read, the more he found that almost no cultivator's body was immortal. Whether it was Wang Chongyang, the founder of the Chuanjin Dragon sect, or Sun Lutong, who had obtained it during the Republic of China, their deaths were all recorded in history, especially Wang Chongyang. After his death, his body had been dug up and abandoned in the wilderness. In Li Yundong's opinion, since such a cultivator couldn't escape death, what was the use of cultivating? But now, this question made Li Yundong suddenly see the light. Although Zhang Ling had reprimanded Li Yundong just now, her words had revealed a secret of the cultivation world. The ultimate goal of cultivators was not to cultivate their bodies to the point of immortality, but to cultivate their yang spirit to the point of immortality. The physical body would die, but it was just a bag that carried the yang spirit, and the yang spirit was eternal. Li Yundong thought to himself, the yang spirit is a spirit body, and it can change at will. Since Zhang Ling can change into 4 and turn her yang spirit into the original god, why can't I? As soon as this thought came to mind, Li Yundong's yang spirit began to change obviously. A black aura came out of his body, making him look like he was surrounded by dark clouds. His skin was as dark as steel, and a red and black aura came out of his nostrils. Zhang Ling didn't know that her casual words had inadvertently made Li Yundong understand the Tao. She saw that Li Yundong's yang spirit suddenly became extremely ferocious, and 2 different auras came out of his nostrils. She was shocked and said coldly, "You really have cultivated the heavenly Jindan technique, and you have even cultivated to the 8th phase. It's really rare for someone to be able to cultivate to your level at such a young age. However, do you think you can deal with me at the 8th phase? When Zhongling spoke, the 4 doppelgangers spoke at the same time. Their voices came from all directions, seeming to be extremely powerful and oppressive. The air around them was shaking constantly, as if the fairy of Jiutian was scolding them loudly. But as soon as Zhongling's voice fell, Li Yundong's young spirit body made a crashing sound, and a human body grew out from one side of his shoulder, with an extra head and 2 arms. Then another human body grew out from the other side, with another head and 2 arms. This time, Zhongling was shocked. She fixed her eyes on Li Yundong's young spirit and said in shock, "Akalanatha? This is impossible. You are obviously a Taoist cultivator. How can your original god spirit transform into Akalanatha?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "Is there something you don't know? Watch me." After that, Li Yundong rushed toward one of Zhongling's doppelgangers like a black whirlwind. Zhongling was shocked and confused, and her combat strength was greatly reduced. This doppelganger was beaten back, and the other 3 doppelgangers shouted at the same time and rushed toward Li Yundong. The young spirits of the 2 men were fighting fiercely in mid-air, but their bodies were motionless in the shop of the Desanxian, like 2 stone statues. The customers in the store were all confused. They whispered to each other, "What's going on? Why didn't he move? That's right. What is young Master Li doing? Why is he stunned? Is there no way to get the cup back? I haven't seen him move at all. How can he know that he can't get it back without trying? Maybe he's thinking of a way." Lu Feier also whispered to Chow Kefi, "Sister Chow, what are they doing? Are they competing to see who can stare longer?" Chow Kefi glared at her and said, "Shut up." She was also secretly worried about Li Yundong, wondering if there was any way she could help him save some face if Li Yundong lost. But Chow Kefi's concern made her panic, especially at this time, when there were celebrities from all walks of life sitting upstairs and downstairs. No matter who it was, she couldn't afford to offend them. Her words carried little weight, so how could she say anything? For a moment, Chow Kefi was so anxious that she clenched her fists, and her palms were all sweaty. As for Zi Yuan, Su Chan, Zhou Qin, and the other cultivators, they were even more nervous than the people around them. They all widened their eyes and stared at Li Yundong. From time to time, they glanced at Zhongling, trying to judge the changes in the battle through their expressions. Seeing Li Yundong's angry eyes and frown at the beginning, they couldn't help but feel their hearts skip a beat. They thought to themselves, "Oh no, Li Yundong must be at a disadvantage." After a while, seeing that Li Yundong was still gritting his teeth, they couldn't help looking at Zhongling anxiously, only to see that Zhongling was also frowning and glaring. The 2 of them stared at each other, as if they were competing to see who could stare the other to death first. Zhou Qin hadn't been cultivating for a long time, so she couldn't help whispering to Su Chan, "Su Chan, what's going on? Why are the 2 of them not moving?" Su Chan whispered to Zhou Qin, "I guess their young spirits must be fighting secretly, so both of them are concentrating on controlling the young spirits and don't dare to relax at all." Zhou Qin was shocked. "Young spirits fighting? Where? Why didn't I see it?" Su Chan whispered, "Didn't you see both of them throw out a talisman just now? Although I didn't see the pattern of that talisman clearly, I guess it was the goddess Nyan's seal, which is also the invisibility talisman. These 2 invisibility talismans secretly hide the young spirits of the 2 of them, so we can't see them fighting." Hearing this, Zhou Qin's heart was filled with awe and curiosity. She looked around and whispered, "Will they be around us?" Su Chan shook her head and said, "I don't think so. I guess they should be in the air." Zhou Qin sighed in a low voice. "Su Chan, you know so much." Su Chan giggled. "Sister Zhou Qin, you're the one who knows a lot." Zhou Qin smiled slightly and didn't say anything. While the 2 of them were whispering to each other, Zi Yuan frowned slightly. She looked up at the sky outside, and then at the people around her. Seeing that they were all staring at the field, she walked out quietly. As soon as she moved, Du Fei and Zheng Yuan, who were beside her, noticed her and followed her out. At this time in midair, The battle between Li Yundong and Zhang Ling had entered a white-hot stage. Li Yundong had 3 heads and 6 arms, and his defense was impenetrable. Zhang Ling's 4 doppelgangers couldn't penetrate his defense at all, and the other magic she cast was also dispersed by Li Yundong's Mahamudra, which made Zhang Ling gnash her teeth in hatred. In particular, Li Yundong's immovable Wisdom King, who had 3 heads and 6 arms, spoke the mantra and breathed out 2 qi from his nostrils. It was really like the immovable Wisdom King had descended to the world. When the immovable Wisdom King fundamental seal came out, Zhang Ling didn't even dare to take it, especially when Li Yundong's palm shot out. The palm print shone with golden light and flew to the horizon, out of sight with the naked eye, before disappearing. Such power was really terrifying. The more Zhang Ling fought, the more shocked she became. She thought to herself, is this Li Yundong the reincarnation of the immovable Wisdom King? How can he be so powerful? But she quickly denied this idea. No, it's impossible. The immovable Wisdom King is a compassionate, wise and bright king who can control all phenomena. This Li Yundong is so hateful. How can he be the reincarnation of the immovable Wisdom King? Li Yundong didn't know what Zhang Ling was thinking, but when he saw that Zhang Ling's offensive was getting weaker and weaker, he became more and more excited. The Jinqi all over his body was like a long river, surging endlessly. The Mahamudra from his 6 arms were like cannonballs, so Zhang Ling's 4 doppelgangers couldn't get close. At first, Zhang Ling wanted to rely on her flexible and agile skills to dodge the Mahamudra, thereby consuming Li Yundong's Jinqi. However, she saw that Li Yundong had made hundreds of Mahamudra in a row. Not only did his Jinqi not show any signs of exhaustion, but the Mahamudra was getting fiercer and fiercer, and his Jinqi was getting more and more vigorous. Zhang Ling complained in her heart. For a moment, she regretted fighting with Li Yundong in terms of Yang spirit. After cultivators cultivated to the top level of Yang spirit, it was difficult to separate their cultivation realms. In terms of realm, Zhang Ling and Li Yundong were both at the top level of Yang spirit. But in terms of Shentong and Kung Fu, she was far stronger than Li Yundong, especially in terms of Shentong and Taoist magic. However, Zhang Ling was best at the Shentong of earth fire. She could take out the true fire from the 9 earths to fight with her opponent. This was her most powerful Kung Fu, especially when she used her unique skill to take out the Samadhi true fire from the 9 earths. It was a terrifying magic that could burn everything, and even the mantra Mahamudra could not disperse it. However, she was now fighting with Li Yundong in mid-air, and there was no place for her to borrow strength. She couldn't even use the Shentong of earth fire, and her other magic had been dispersed by Li Yundong one by one. She couldn't do anything to him at all. Zhang Ling was gritting her teeth in hatred. Her mind was distracted, and suddenly one of the Yang spirits dodged a little slower and was caught by Li Yundong. Li Yundong's 6 arms grabbed Zhang Ling's doppelganger and pulled it hard, immediately tearing it apart. Zhang Ling's other 3 doppelgangers suddenly let out a shrill scream, and the doppelganger that had been torn apart by Li Yundong turned into a wisp of green smoke and escaped from Li Yundong's hands. It quickly gathered together and then returned to its original appearance. Zhang Ling roared in pain. Li Yundong, how dare you hurt my Yang spirit? Li Yundong sneered and said, if you don't admit defeat, I'll tear you apart until you can never recover. Let's see how much Jinqi you can waste. Zhang Ling roared. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. How dare you be so arrogant? Zhang Ling was so angry that she subconsciously wanted to fly back to the ground and use the 9 earths fire to fight with Li Yundong. But before she could move, she suddenly saw a large dark cloud floating in the sky. The dark clouds above their heads were rolling, and thunder and lightning were intertwined. Li Yundong and Zhang Ling were shocked at the same time. They both felt a pair of extremely terrifying and dignified eyes staring at them. Zhang Ling said angrily, Li Yundong, you cheated. How dare you use such a dirty trick? Aren't you afraid of attracting heavenly thunder and hurting innocent people? Li Yundong was also shocked and angry. I didn't attract it. Do you think I'm crazy? Zhang Ling was stunned. If you didn't attract it, then who did? Could it be that someone is trying to reap the benefits? Chapter 416. Go to watch net. Just as the two of them were in a state of bewilderment and guessing at each other, Ziyuan suddenly appeared not far away from them. She said in a clear voice, "Stop guessing. Hurry up and go down. The young spirit is flying so high and fighting so fiercely. Are you afraid that heavenly thunder won't strike down?" Zhang Ling turned her head and sneered with an unkind look in her eyes. "Ziyuan, it's really a pleasant surprise that our Jingyi school has a traitor like you." Li Yundong also snorted. "The winner hasn't been decided yet. What if this guy goes back on his word?" Zhang Ling said angrily. "Li Yundong, in terms of age, I'm older than your parents. In terms of seniority, I'm several generations older than you. How dare you humiliate me like this?" Li Yundong also said angrily. "Since you are older, why did you allow your disciple to provoke and humiliate Ziyuan again and again? Is this how you righteous sects do things? Come. We won't rest until we determine a victor today. Let's see if the heavenly lightning strikes you or me." Zhang Ling was extremely angry. She was about to fight with him again when she saw Zhou Ping, Du Fei, Zheng Yuan, and the others flying up. Watch net. 7K. OM. As soon as Zhou Ping saw Ziyuan, she shouted, "Do you want to bully us with numbers?" Li Yundong sneered. "Do you think we are like you?" Zhou Ping was so angry that she was about to refute. Du Fei, who was beside her, looked at the sky worriedly and advised, Jinren Li, I saw your battle just now. One of you is a famous Taoist, and the other is a rising star. This should have been a blessing for our Taoist school. As the saying goes, it's better to squash enmity than keep it alive. Moreover, it's a bit unethical to fight under the dark clouds of rolling thunder. I think it's better to stop for the time being." Zheng Yuan also stroked his beard and said with a compassionate expression, "Jinren is right. I think there's something fishy about this heavenly lightning. Let's give up for now." Li Yundong said flatly, "No, you ruined my tea house on the first day of its opening. How can I do business in the future? We must determine the winner today." Zhang Ling also sneered and said, "Good, I want to see how capable you are at Galanatha." Seeing that the two of them were about to fight again, the people next to them suddenly became anxious. Ziyuan advised, "Since there is a notary, why don't we let him decide who wins and who loses?" As soon as Ziyuan said this, the faces of Du Fei and Zheng Yuan stiffened. They cursed in their hearts. "Damn it, this Ziyuan really knows how to push the boat with the current and bring trouble to others. If he had known it would be like this, he wouldn't have joined in the fun and become a notary." Li Yundong turned his head to look at Du Fei, cupped his hands and said, "Jinren, what do you think?" Du Fei looked embarrassed. He thought for a moment, narrowed his eyes and gritted his teeth. "In my opinion, Jinren did have the upper hand just now, and one of Jinren Zhang's young spirit doppelgangers was destroyed. If the fight continued, it would be difficult to determine the outcome. But judging from the situation just now, Jinren should have won." Zhang Ling laughed coldly. "Great, the Chuanjin dragon sect has finally revealed its fox tail. Well said, Jinren. Du Fei cupped his hands and said, "Jinren Zhang, I'm just telling the truth." Zhang Ling snorted, turned to look at Zheng Yuan, and said coldly, "What did Leader Zheng say?" Zhang Ling thought to herself, "It seems that I won't be able to get away with it today. I offended Zheng Yuan last time, and I'm afraid he will take revenge this time." But just as Zhang Ling was thinking about this, Zheng Yuan said, "Jinren is wrong. Since it's a battle of methods, how can the outcome be decided by temporary gains and losses? In my opinion, if the fight continues like this, Jinren Zhang will definitely be able to reverse the situation with her profound cultivation foundation and various Shentong Taoist magic. So in my opinion, Jinren Zhang should have won, because her cultivation skills are higher than Jinren Li's." Hearing this, Zhang Ling was both surprised and happy. She thought to herself, did Zheng Yuan not care about the past? Was I wrong about him? Li Yundong was angry in his heart. He sneered and said, "Zheng Yuan, I haven't settled the score with you last time. Do you want to die?" A glimmer of light flashed in Zheng Yuan's eyes. His face didn't change. He slowly stroked his beard and said, "Jinren, what do you mean? I don't understand." I'm just speaking frankly. You can ask the others. In terms of cultivation, who is higher? You or Zhenrenzhang? Li Yundong said angrily. Will the one with a higher cultivation win? In that case, it shouldn't have been Wu Hao and LV Fengping who died at the foot of the Himalayas, but me. Zheng Yuan suddenly became furious and said with a ferocious face, Li Yundong, what did you say? Li Yundong's words had pierced Zheng Yuan's heart. If Zheng Yuan also joined the battle, and the cultivators fought in mid-air, the heavenly thunder would be attracted by their spiritual energy and jinqi, and it would definitely fall faster. If it really fell, the consequences would be unimaginable. Zi Yuan immediately said, since the two notaries insist on their own opinions, we should let another notary judge who will win and who will lose. Hearing this, Du Fei immediately said, Zhenren Zi Yuan is right. Shen Wankai should be the judge. Zheng Yuan rolled his eyes and nodded in agreement. Zhang Ling sneered and said, he is just a mortal and can't see us fighting. How can he judge the outcome? Zi Yuan said, Zhenrenzhang is right, but since he can't see the battle between the two of you, why don't you add another battle that he can see, and then use it as evidence to let him decide the outcome? Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He said, Zhenrenzhang, you go first. I'll decide the rules for the second round. Zi Yuan's expression didn't change, but she praised Li Yundong's cleverness and tacit understanding in her heart. Zhang Ling was bold and conceited. Seeing that the lightning in the dark clouds above her head was getting fiercer and fiercer, she nodded and said, well, if you have any skills, just say it. After that, her figure flashed and she quickly flew to the ground. Li Yundong and Zi Yuan looked at each other and quickly flew back. As soon as Li Yundong's yang spirit returned, he saw Zi Yuan and the others walk in one after another. The guests upstairs and downstairs of Desanxian were all staring at him, as if they were waiting for him to make the teacup appear. Li Yundong thought to himself, I can't say that I was evenly matched with Zhang Ling just now, so I have to add another battle. But now everyone is looking at me and wants me to make the teacup come out. What should I say? Li Yundong was thinking, but soon he had an idea. He cupped his hands and said, sorry to keep you waiting. I'll make the teacup come out later. As he said this, he said to Su Chan, Chaner, go find a big water jar or a big tea jar. Remember, it must be big, the bigger the better. Su Chan rolled her eyes. Although she didn't know what Li Yundong was going to do, she was very clever and said, it just so happens that I bought a big tea jar before. It happens to come in handy today. As she said this, she ran into the storage room and came out with a tea jar in one hand. Everyone looked at it curiously and was shocked. They saw that the tea jar in Su Chan's hand was as thick as the waists of two strong men, and it reached Su Chan's waist. It was more than 1 meter high. They laughed in surprise and said, how is this a tea jar? This is clearly a rice jar. It's strange. How could there be such a big jar in this tea shop? Su Chan carried the tea jar to the field and put it down easily. The tea jar fell to the ground with a muffled thud. Only then did everyone realize that the tea jar was extremely heavy. They immediately looked at Su Chan in surprise and thought to themselves, how could such a beautiful and lovely girl be so strong? How could she pick up such a big water jar with one hand? It's fine that there are so many beautiful women in Desanxian, but all of them have unique skills? It's amazing, really amazing. When Li Yundong saw the water jar, he nodded to Su Chan and said, go fill the tea jar with water. Su Chan sighed and turned to go into the back room. Zhou Qin, who was beside her, also said, I'll go help too. As soon as she moved, Chao Kefi, who had been watching the field eagerly, also said, I'll go too. Lu Feier rolled her eyes and followed her with a smile. After the beauties entered the back room, Su Chan looked back curiously and asked, why are there so many people here? I can do it alone. Zhou Qin smiled and said, well, you're the only one in the limelight. Can't I help master a little? Su Chan giggled and said, Sister Zhou Qin, help me carry 2 buckets of water later. Chao Kefi and Lu Feier didn't have time to look at the back room of Desanxian. They saw Su Chan and Zhou Qin each fill 2 buckets of water, and then walk out while talking and laughing. The buckets in their hands were deep and thick, and they were probably 20 or 30 kilograms full of water. However, the two of them lifted them as if they were light. Moreover, the water in the buckets didn't ripple, and not a single drop was spilled. Chow Kefi and Lu Feier were amazed. Chow Kefi winked at Lu Feier and said in a low voice, "Did you see that? They are masters, aren't they?" Lu Feier nodded and looked at Su Chan and Zhou Qin in admiration. She whispered, "Look, they are so slim and weak. I didn't expect them to be so strong." Chow Kefi said in a low voice, "This is not just about strength. Look at their buckets full. They walk so fast without spilling any water. This is kung fu." Lu Feier exclaimed, "I really don't know how they learned it." Chow Kefi smiled and said, "Didn't you hear Zhou Qin say that she learned it from her master?" Lu Feier asked curiously, "Who is her master?" Chow Kefi laughed and said, "You are a star. How can your observation skills be so poor? Didn't you see that when Zhou Qin talked to Li Yundong, she called him master? Of course, her master is Li Yundong." Lu Feier blinked her eyes and said, "No way. How old is he? He should be about the same age as me, right?" Chow Kefi smiled and said, "There is no age difference in learning. Those who are capable can be teachers. The disciple is a master, and the master is definitely not inferior. Just watch." Lu Feier made a face and said, "Humph. I'd like to see what he's going to do with such a tank of water, and how he's going to change the cup back." Chapter 417. Go to Watch Network. At this time, the guests upstairs and downstairs of Desanxian saw Su Chan and Zhou Qin come out with 2 large buckets and fill the huge teapot at once. "Go to Kamwang. 7K. OM. Li Yundong stood next to the water jar and said in a clear voice, "Everyone, watch carefully." Just now, Zhang Ling performed a little trick of making the cup in the teapot disappear without getting close to it. Now I will show you a little trick of sucking up all the water in the teapot without touching it. Shen Wankai smiled and said, "Child Li, this trick of yours has nothing to do with making a teacup. Even if you can drink it all, how can you make the teacup appear?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Don't worry, Mr. Shen. After I finish drinking the water in the teapot, it will be Zhang Ling's turn. If she can drink it all, then the teacup won't appear. If she can't drink it all, then the teacup will appear." Shen Wankai was surprised. What kind of logic is this? Strange, it's really strange. Shen Yu, who was standing to one side, sneered, turned his head away, and whispered with disdain, "What a trick!" However, Shen Hui had seen some of Li Yundong's magic. She watched curiously from the side, and it was rare that she didn't make any sarcastic remarks. At this time, the guests upstairs and downstairs were also whispering to each other and discussing, "Hey, what do you think drinking water has to do with making a teacup?" "I don't know. I'm just curious. How can I drink water without touching the teapot?" "Are you stupid? If I don't touch the teapot, can't I use a cup?" "That's right. However, even if you drink it with a cup, how can you finish such a big jar of water? Can't you drink it slowly? You can finish it eventually." "Ah, no way. Are we going to watch Child Li drink water slowly here? What's so interesting about this trick? This. Hey, why are you so serious with me? Just watch what Child Li does." Yes. Hey, no, you're the one who's serious with me." Li Yunyang ignored the crowd and said meaningfully to Zhang Ling, "Jimren Zhang, what do you think?" Zhang Ling frowned inwardly. However, she was extremely conceited. If Li Yundong could do it, she could definitely do it as well. She said proudly, "Let's do as you say." Li Yundong nodded and said, "Okay." He cupped one hand in the other before his chest and said loudly, "Everyone, please watch carefully." In an instant, there was silence in the Desanxian building. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Li Yundong. Li Yunyang stood in front of the big water tank. He took a deep breath and shook his body. A force came from the bottom up, like an old bear shaking off lice. He shook the force to his hands. Li Yundong's hands were 1 foot above the water tank, and then he slowly pushed them, as if he was doing Tai Chi. At first, everyone thought that Li Yundong was performing some kind of trick, but soon, They all widened their eyes and saw that the water in the teapot began to slowly rotate by itself. As Li Yundong's movements became faster and faster, the water in the teapot also began to rotate faster and faster. When the swirling water in the teapot was about to splash out, Li Yundong suddenly stopped and slapped both sides of the teapot with his palms. With a bang, a column of water suddenly rushed up from the center of the teapot. Li Yundong immediately took a deep breath, and the column of water went into his mouth. Although the crowd didn't know what Li Yundong was up to, they immediately cheered when they saw that Li Yundong's move was really elegant and beautiful. At first, their cheers were a little intermittent, but soon they found that Li Yundong's mouth did not stop sucking water. The water in the water tank was rapidly decreasing, and in a short time, the water level had dropped by 2 fingers. Li Yundong's breath seemed to be extremely long, and he had been sucking for a minute without stopping. At this time, the people upstairs and downstairs were all shocked. They stood up one after another, and looked at Li Yundong with their eyes wide open. One by one, they cheered and applauded like thunder. At this time, Li Yundong's aura and jinqi had surged to an incredible level. White steam was rising from the top of his head, and his clothes were fluttering without any wind. He was like an immortal descending to the world. The crowd watched for a while. 2 minutes later, Li Yundong's breath was still not stopped, and he had already sucked half of the water in the water tank. At this time, they were all so shocked that they even forgot to applaud and cheer. They just looked at Li Yundong with their mouths agape and thought, "Is he still human? How did he do it? His mouth is more than 2 feet away from the water tank. How did he suck the water up? How could he breathe for so long without stopping? This half a tank of water should be at least 20 liters. How could he suck it all in one breath? Can he drink it?" At this time, the expressions of Zhou Ping and Zhang Ling also changed slightly, and they looked at Li Yundong in horror. As cultivators, they naturally knew that Li Yundong was relying on his incomparably powerful and condensed jinqi to absorb the water in the tank in the air. It was not difficult to do this, but it was difficult to hold on for such a long time. Seeing her master's ugly expression, Zhou Ping forced a smile and said, "He won't be able to hold on for long." Zhang Ling snorted and didn't say anything, but another minute passed, and Li Yundong's breath was still there. At this time, everyone looked at Li Yundong and felt that he should have suffocated to death, but Li Yundong was still sucking the water in the tank. This made everyone have an illusion that the person in front of them was not a person, but a divine dragon that had descended from the 9th heaven. At this time, everyone upstairs and downstairs of Desanxian was shocked. Not only had they never seen anyone who could absorb water in the air, but they had also seen someone who could drink more than half of a vat of water in one breath. Moreover, even if they did not do these 2 things, they had never heard of anyone who could take a breath for 2 minutes without stopping. In the eyes of ordinary people, Li Yundong's continuous breathing for 2 minutes was simply not something that a human could do. No matter how large a person's lung capacity was, it was absolutely impossible for it to be so large. But they didn't know that at this time, Li Yundong's external qi had long been cut off, and it was the internal qi in his body that supported him. As the saying goes, when the mortal breath stops, the jinqi rises, and it seems to exist unintentionally. It was his powerful Niden that was driving Li Yundong's qi. The Niden in his body was rotating at an astonishing speed, thus driving the jinqi in his body to flow out continuously. Most people's Niden belonged to the fire attribute, but Li Yundong's Niden had been refined by the power of thunder and lightning when he had built the Zhuji phase in the Himalayas. It was born with the attribute of thunder and lightning, so it could be called a thunder-fire Niden. Thunder originated from water, and fire could quickly evaporate and dissolve water into steam. Therefore, the water that Li Yundong had absorbed into his body was quickly dissolved by his Niden into a large amount of water vapor, which then evaporated from the Baihui acupoint on the top of his head. After another minute, the water tank was about to be bottomed out. Everyone saw white steam rising from the top of Li Yundong's head. A white line rushed straight to the roof, and quickly spread out and rolled, like 3 mist flowers. It was as if 3 flowers had gathered above one's head. In the mist, Li Yundong's clothes and black hair fluttered without any wind. He was really like an immortal with great magical power, which was awe-inspiring. After an unknown period of time, Li Yundong suddenly sucked up the last drop of water in the water tank. Only then did everyone let out a sigh of relief. It was as if the past few minutes had been as long as centuries. They all looked at Li Yundong in a daze and couldn't say a word, as if what had just happened had exceeded their imagination. The shop of Desanxian was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. Li Yundong didn't touch the tank and sucked up all the water in it. His stomach didn't bulge, and his body didn't look cumbersome or heavy at all. He lifted the water tank with one hand and turned it upside down. Then he turned it around and showed it to the people around him, showing them that there was no drop of water left in the tank. At this time, people seemed to wake up from a dream and let out an earth-shattering cheer. The sound almost lifted the roof. The celebrities sitting on the second floor were so excited that they applauded like thunder. They whispered to each other, "This is incredible. This is not a trick. This is obviously an immortal. Immortal, this is definitely an immortal." Someone else shouted, "Immortally one more." Lu Feier was so excited that her little hands turned red, but she didn't know it. Chow Kefi was still able to control herself. She applauded elegantly and politely, but her elbow was hitting Lu Feier hard, and she kept saying, "How is it? Is it a master? Is it a master?" Lu Feier admired Li Yundong to the extreme in her heart, and kept applauding, but she was a little unconvinced by Chow Kefi and said, "The teacup hasn't come out yet." Yin Mengfan looked at Li Yundong strangely, and from time to time, she looked at Shen Wangkai, Shen Yu, and Shen Hui, who were so shocked that they couldn't speak. There was a thoughtful look in her eyes. Su Chan, Zi Yuan, Zhou Qin, and the others also looked at each other with strong joy and admiration in their eyes. They were all knowledgeable people, and they knew how terrifying it was for Li Yundong to be able to do this. Not only them, but even Zheng Yuan and Du Fei looked at Li Yundong with a complicated look on their faces. Ding Nen also looked at Li Yundong in shock, and there was a strong sense of worship and admiration in her eyes. Although Zhou Ping had seen Li Yundong's ability several times, Li Yundong's move today made her hair stand on end. She naturally knew how strong and condensed she was to be able to do this. How terrifying and powerful was his Niden to be able to break down so much water in an instant. Zhou Ping glanced at her master uneasily, only to see Zhang Ling staring at Li Yundong with an extremely ugly expression. She didn't say a word. After a long time, she narrowed her eyes slightly, as if she had made a major decision. Li Yundong turned around to let everyone see that there was indeed no water left in the water jar. He turned around and was about to speak to Zhang Ling, but suddenly, a teacup fell from the air. The speed at which the teacup fell was so fast that it almost seemed that someone had deliberately thrown it to the ground in exasperation. Li Yundong was quick to react. His body spun like a top, and he put the teacup on the ground with one hand. He lowered his other hand, like a monkey fishing for the moon. His wrist turned softly, and his palm caught the teacup firmly. Everyone saw a flash of white light, and an object shaped like a teacup quickly fell from midair. Then Li Yundong's body spun. When he stood up again, he was holding a teacup in one hand, and standing proudly with the other behind his back. Li Yundong said loudly, "Everyone please look. I've changed the teacup back." At this moment, everyone felt as if they were watching a Hollywood blockbuster. The ups and downs made them breathless. It was only at this moment that they could finally exhale all of their breaths, put down all the stones in their hearts, and cheered loudly. Li Yundong held the teacup high, and said to Zheng Yuan and Du Fei, "Do you want to see if it's the original teacup?" Zheng Yuan and Du Fei were both shocked by Li Yundong's move just now and shook their heads. Li Yundong turned around again and said to Chen Wangkai, "Mr. Shen, do you want to have a look?" Chen Wangkai walked up trembling with excitement. He looked at Li Yundong as if he was looking at a living immortal. He held the teacup in Li Yundong's palm with both hands, and looked at it carefully. Then he shouted, Yes, this is the teacup." Chen Wangkai was extremely excited. He gave a thumbs up and said loudly, "I, Chen Wangkai, have traveled all over the world and seen countless strange people. But Childly, you are the most powerful one I have ever seen. I am convinced. At this time, the outcome of the battle was self-evident. Zhang Ling snorted coldly. She knew that she didn't have such a long Jinqi aura. Unless she used magic, she couldn't absorb water with Jinqi like Li Yundong did. Her face was ugly, and she walked out without saying a word. Seeing that the situation was not good, Zhou Ping immediately followed her out. When they left, Zhao Yujin of the tea house of Zhao had already been helped up by the beautiful women in Cheongsam. But he was still standing there like a stone statue. Before Zhou Ping left, she glanced at her and secretly cursed in her heart. If it weren't for the fact that this useless thing is so incompetent, why would we have to force our way out? Humph. When the two of them left the Desangxian shop, they could still hear the people inside cheering loudly, especially the cheers of Li Yundong's classmates. Zhang Ling felt that these voices were extremely harsh. She said to Zhou Ping with a livid face, "No matter what means you use, you have to find a way to get the heavenly Jindan technique for me." Zhou Ping was stunned for a moment. "The heavenly Jindan technique?" Zhang Ling said angrily. "Are you deaf?" If Li Yundong hadn't practiced the heavenly Jindan technique, how could his qi be so long, and his Niden be so powerful? Now he is already so strong at the 8th stage. If he breaks through to the 9th stage in the future, will there still be a place for us in the world? Vote for recommendation. Previous page, return to table of contents, next page, error report. If you like, please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your personal views. Chapter 418. Go to watch net. As soon as Zhang Ling and Zhou Ping left, the people upstairs and downstairs of Desangxian fell into jubilation. Zheng Yuan, who had been against Li Yundong before, also cupped his hands and said to Li Yundong with a smile on his face, "Congratulations on the successful opening of Jinren Li's tea house." "Congratulations." Li Yundong glanced at him and said coldly, "Thank you very much. Go to watch net. 7K. OM. At this time, Ding Nan also said to Li Yundong with mixed feelings, "Li Yundong, I know you have some opinions about me, but no matter what, we used to be classmates. For the sake of our former classmates, I wish you a prosperous business and a lot of money." Hearing this, Li Yundong also felt a myriad of emotions in his heart. He looked at the tall girl in front of him with a complicated look in his eyes, sighed and said, "Ding Nan, I know I can't persuade you now, but, alas, you're on your own." Ding Nan's eyes darkened. She lowered her head, as if she didn't want Li Yundong to see the feelings in her eyes. She said in a low voice, "Then I'll go first." After that she walked away quickly. Zheng Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly and said to Li Yundong meaningfully, "Jinren Li, your relationship with my beloved disciple is quite good." Although Li Yundong didn't know why Ding Nan had become Zheng Yuan's disciple, he guessed that there must be some secret reasons. He also knew that Zheng Yuan was a cunning and ruthless person, so he deliberately said vaguely, "There is no hatred in this world that can't be let go, and there is no grievance that can't be solved. What's more, your disciple has a good relationship with me in the past. What's wrong? Leader Zheng, is there something you can't figure out?" Zheng Yuan said with a fake smile, "It's nothing, Jinren Li. The Taoist assembly will be held in a month. We'll meet again." After that, he cupped his hands and left with a flick of his sleeves. For a moment, Ding Nan couldn't help showing her true feelings in front of Li Yundong, but after she left, she secretly regretted it. She was very clear about Zheng Yuan's thoughts and means. If she revealed a flaw and let him know that she was not LV Fengping, she would definitely die. Ding Nan didn't go far before she stopped. When Zheng Yuan came up to her, she whispered, "Master, I'm sorry." Zheng Yuan put his hands behind his back and said lightly, "Oh, where did that come from?" Ding Nan said in a low voice, "I know you will overthink what I said just now, Master, but I have no choice." Zheng Yuan said indifferently, "Oh." Ding Nan said with tears in her eyes, "Master, you've seen it. This Li Yundong is too strong. I really don't dare to hope that I can succeed in my revenge. I just hope that you won't have any enmity with him in the future. If this strong man comes and kills you again, then I will have no one to rely on in this world. Ding Nan had been rolling around Zhou Qin's side for a long time, so her acting skills had long been honed to perfection. When she cried, she really looked like a pear blossom in the rain, which made people feel sorry for her. Zheng Yuan's face, which had been tense, suddenly relaxed. He said, "You don't have to talk to him so affectionately. Those who don't know might think." "Humph." Ding Nan continued, "Master, in this way, we can numb Li Yundong and relax his vigilance. Secondly, we may resolve the grudge between him and us. If something happens in the future, we will have a strong ally." Zheng Yuan nodded slightly. "You're right. Li Yundong's cultivation speed is really terrifying. I have lived for so many years, but I have never seen such a powerful young man. If he is a friend and not an enemy, it will be a great thing." Ding Nan couldn't help but feel happy. But soon Zheng Yuan changed the topic and said, "But do you think Li Yundong is a fool? Do you think you can turn an enemy into a friend by saying these words?" Ding Nan cursed in her heart. This old pervert is really hard to fool. Ding Nan sobbed softly again and said, "Master, this body of mine used to be Li Yundong's classmate, and our relationship was quite deep. He didn't know that I had already occupied the body of his former classmate, so he didn't know the secret, and thought that I was his classmate. I knew this, so I said those words boldly, but I didn't expect that it would make you doubt me. Please punish me." After that, Ding Nan was about to kneel down. Although Zheng Yuan was cruel and merciless, he was also a person who cherished flowers. He stopped her with a hand and said with a smile, "There are so many people here. What are you doing? Let's go. Since you don't have such thoughts, I won't doubt you. But if you have any ideas in the future, you should tell me in advance. Otherwise, it will be bad if there is a gap between master and disciple." Ding Nan smiled through her tears and said, "Thank you for your magnanimity, master." Zheng Yuan smiled and took Ding Nan's hand. "Let's go back. The Taoist assembly will be held in a month. I have to prepare well then." Ding Nan felt goosebumps all over her body when Zheng Yuan held her hand, but she couldn't shake it off, so she forced herself to smile and said, "I hope you can show your power at the Taoist assembly and suppress all the heroes." Zheng Yuan couldn't help laughing when he heard this. As he touched Ding Nan's hand, he said with a smile, "I need your help." Ding Nan was extremely disgusted. She forced a smile, but in her heart she thought, "This lecture is going too far. I have to think of a way." Although Zheng Yuan's face was also full of smiles, there was still a trace of doubt in his heart. "Pinga has been a little strange since she took possession of me. Although she said that today, I still feel that it's a little strange. No, I have to test her again when I have a chance in the future." The two of them talked and laughed happily along the way, but in secret, they had their own thoughts and ulterior motives. In De Sangxian's shop, Li Yundong suddenly became the focus of everyone's attention. The reason why many celebrities from all walks of life had come to attend the opening ceremony of this small tea house was all for the sake of the Zhou family. If the Zhou family had not recovered, Zhou Qin would not have been able to ask these people to come even if she had knocked her head. But now that the Zhou family had made a comeback, these people had come uninvited. In the officialdom, there was nothing more hypocritical than this. At the beginning, many of them had subconsciously regarded Li Yundong as half a son-in-law of the Zhou family. Therefore, although they were polite, they had never thought in their hearts, "This lucky guy has climbed up a high branch. A guy who lives off women," and so on. But now it seemed that they were all looking at Li Yundong with new eyes and were shocked. Only then did some people understand what it meant when Zhou Qin respectfully called Li Yundong master. It turned out that this overly young boy was really a great master. Lu Feier looked at Li Yundong with excitement and fanaticism. She grabbed Chao Kefi's clothes hard and said anxiously, Sister Chao, this guy is really a master. He's so tall." Chao Kefi also looked at Li Yundong in awe. She had known that Li Yundong was a strange person, but in her opinion, he was a master of kung fu. However, she hadn't expected that Li Yundong's kung fu would far exceed her expectations and imagination. It had already gone beyond the scope of human beings, and was awe-inspiring. Chow Kefi was pulled away by Lu Feier. She withdrew her gaze from Li Yundong and scolded with a smile. Are you convinced now? Lu Feier nodded her head like a chicken pecking rice. I'm convinced. How did he do it? Chow Kefi smiled and said, I don't know. Why don't you ask him? Lu Feier's eyes lit up at first, but when she remembered Li Yundong's attitude towards her before, her face suddenly fell. Humph. This guy not only has eyes on the top of his head, but he's also short-sighted. He doesn't care about me. Chow Kefi covered her mouth and laughed. Oh, even a big star is useless? Lu Feier said angrily. Sister Chow, I'm kind enough to accompany you out. How can you laugh at me like this? Chow Kefi laughed and said, It's obvious that you want to skip work. You even threw your agent aside and turned off your cell phone, didn't you? Humph. I'll see what you can do when you turn on your cell phone later. Lu Feier said with a smile. Who told her to be so strict with me all day long? Let her be anxious. Humph. But Sister Chow, you can't do this. At least let me figure out what's going on. Otherwise, I won't be able to sleep tonight. Chow Kefi snorted and said, I can't help it. Although he is young, he has a lot of ideas in his mind. Didn't you see that I was frantically looking for him a while ago? This heartless thing actually disappeared without saying a word. It's useless to beg such a person. Lu Feier looked disappointed. Ah, if I had known this would happen, I might as well not have come. Isn't he just trying to make me depressed? Yin Mengfan, who was standing to one side, suddenly smiled and said, Lu Feier, don't worry. I guess my uncle will ask Li Yundong to be Shen Yu and Shen Hui's teacher in a while. Chow Kefi asked curiously, How do you know? Yin Mengfan looked at Shen Hui, then turned her head to Chow Kefi and said with a smile, Shen Hui secretly told me that the old master wanted to invite Zi Yuan and Li Yundong to be Shen Yu and Shen Hui's family teachers. I think the old master brought them both here today. It's very likely that he wants to worship them in public. Lu Feier couldn't help but interrupt. What does that have to do with me? Yin Mengfan said with a smile. Shen Hui and Shen Yu are both your fans. If Li Yundong accepts them as students, you can save the country in a roundabout way and find out what's going on from the two of them. Lu Feier laughed and said, That's a good idea. But will Li Yundong accept them as disciples? Chow Kefi smiled and said, I think so. Old Master Shen has a lot of influence. While they were talking, Shen Wankai quickly calmed down after his excitement. He said very seriously and sincerely, Young Master Li, the last time we parted in Dongwu City, I was very impressed by the demeanor of you and Miss Zi Yuan. I admired you very much. I wanted to visit you as soon as possible, but I couldn't find your whereabouts. Yesterday, I accidentally heard that young Master Li was going to open a tea house in Tiannan City. I was pleasantly surprised, so I came uninvited. On the one hand, I wanted to congratulate the opening, and on the other. As he said this, he pulled Shen Yu and Shen Hui, who looked reluctant behind him, forward and said, This is my son and my daughter. I believe that young Master Li also knows my son. Haha. He and young Master Li also had some misunderstandings before. But I believe that young Master Li is magnanimous and will not care about it. Moreover, young people don't get to know each other without fighting. As for my daughter, Shen Wankai looked at Shen Hui, but the baby-faced girl suddenly snorted and turned her face away. She didn't buy his words at all. The smile on Shen Wansai's face froze, but he quickly smiled and said, This girl is still shy. Li Yundong smiled slightly and didn't answer Shen Wansai's words. He just looked at him calmly, not at all flattered. Shen Yu saw this and snorted in his heart. In his opinion, what kind of person was his father Shen Wankai? He was a person who would tremble everywhere in Tiannan City if he stamped his feet. He came to ask Li Yundong to be his teacher, which was to give Li Yundong a lot of face. That was to be courteous. But this fellow, he only knew a little trick and was putting on airs. Humph, what's the big deal? Shen Wankai didn't know what his son was thinking. He smiled and said to Li Yundong, I believe that young Master Li also knows my daughter. Haha, I have a presumptuous request. I hope young Master Li will do me a favor. At this time, Li Yundong had already guessed that Shen Wankai wanted him to accept Shen Yu and Shen Hui as his disciples, but he also muttered in his heart, accepting disciples is not like buying cabbages in the market. Moreover, Shen Hui has always been against me. If I accept her as my disciple, wouldn't the world be in chaos? Moreover, Shen Yu's character was quite bad, and he really didn't like him. How could he accept him? But if he didn't accept him, Li Yundong didn't know how to make Shen Wankai step down. He hesitated for a moment, and only hoped that Shen Wankai wouldn't say that he wanted to be his disciple. Shen Wankai then said, "Young Master Li, can you accept my son and my daughter as your disciples? I don't want to learn anything else. I just want to be able to follow you and pour tea. I want to learn from you, young Master Li, who is indifferent to favors and insults, and has a deep and profound cultivation skill. That's enough." Li Yundong smiled bitterly in his heart when he heard this. He thought to himself, sure enough, here it comes. Should I accept them or not? Vote recommendation. Previous page, return to table of contents, next page, error report. If you like, please click here to add Raising a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Raising a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Raising a Fox at Home, please click here to express your personal views. Chapter 419. Go to watch net. As soon as Shen Wankai said this, the people upstairs and downstairs of Desangxian immediately quieted down. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Li Yundong, wanting to see how he would choose. Go to watch net. 7K. OM. Shen Wankai also looked at Li Yundong with bright eyes. He had a smile on his face, and his eyes were full of confidence. In his dictionary, there had never been the word impossible. If he, Shen Wankai, wanted to do something, he would always succeed. What's more, in this situation, he had no other choice but to agree. Besides, he had given Li Yundong enough favor and face. For the sake of his feelings, Li Yundong would also agree. But Shen Wankai didn't expect that at this time. Shen Hui suddenly secretly stepped on Shen Yu's shoes with the tip of her foot, and then quietly stuffed a paper ball into his palm. Shen Yu glanced at Shen Hui, and secretly opened it. His face suddenly changed. He saw that the paper ball said, "I don't care if you want to call this guy master in the future, but do you also want to call your dream lover masteress?" Shen Yu suddenly felt as if his heart had been stabbed by a knife. He jumped up and shouted, "I don't want to take him as my master." In this quiet tea house, Shen Yu's voice was extremely loud. Everyone suddenly burst into an uproar, and then they began to talk. Shen Wankai narrowed his eyes slightly, but the smile on his face remained unchanged. He laughed and said, "What nonsense are you talking about?" Shen Yu straightened his neck and shouted, "Who's talking nonsense?" He pointed at Li Yundong and said angrily, "How can he be my teacher? Learning qi cultivation kung fu? Bah, what era are we in? Why are you still learning this? Dad, you're old and muddled. What's the use of learning this nowadays?" Shen Wankai trembled slightly, and the smile on his face disappeared little by little. He said in a cold voice, "What did you say? Say it again if you have the guts." Shen Wankai was extremely dignified at home. His face darkened, and Shen Yu's heart suddenly trembled. He didn't dare to say anything else, but his face still turned red. He turned his head away and panted heavily, refusing to take Li Yundong as his master. Seeing such an awkward scene, everyone stopped talking and looked at the changes in the field with different gazes. Shen Wankai suppressed his anger and said in a deep voice, "I've already decided on your matter. It's settled." Shen Yu jumped up and shouted, "No, I won't take him as my master even if I die." Chen Wansai's entire body trembled as he clenched his fists tightly. If it wasn't for his strong willpower and shrewdness, he would have done it on the spot. Shen Hui rolled her eyes and quickly said, "Dad, I'll persuade him." After that, without waiting for Shen Wankai to agree, she pulled Shen Yu and whispered, "Stop talking. Let's go. Do you want to die?" Shen Yu was not a fool. He immediately understood. He pushed Shen Hui away and said angrily, "Who asked you to pretend to persuade me? I don't need you to care about me." With that, he turned around and ran. The entourage who had followed Chen Wankai saw that something was wrong and subconsciously wanted to chase after him. But Chen Wankai shouted in a deep voice, "Don't chase after him. Let him go. If you have the guts, don't enter the house." The entourage stood there awkwardly. He looked at Shen Yu's back and then at Chen Wankai, like a clay puppet. Chen Wankai's face was livid. He looked at Shen Hui meaningfully and said lightly, "You persuaded me well." Although Shen Hui smiled, she shivered in her heart. She thought to herself, "It's over. I'm going to be punished by the old master again this time. Humph, it's all Li Yundong's fault. Every time I meet him, nothing good happens. Damn it, damn it." Chen Wankai hadn't expected that the matter he had been so confident in would turn out like this. Although he felt that he had lost face, he still forced a smile and said to Li Yundong, "Child Li, my son has not been disciplined well. I've made a fool of myself." Li Yundong secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He smiled and said, "It's normal for young people to be arrogant and full of vigor." Chen Wankai sighed and said in a very old manner, "Child Li is young and magnanimous. I have never seen such a person in my life. Just now, I was lucky enough to witness Child Li's divine skill. It was really amazing. It's a pity that the scene was not right. Otherwise, I would have had a few drinks with Child Li. Today I'll go first. Child Li, I wish you a prosperous business and a prosperous future." After that, Chen Wankai didn't look around. He just cupped his hands to Li Yuanbo upstairs and said, "Secretary Li, goodbye." Li Yuanbo smiled and raised his teacup to him as a salute. Feng Na, who had been watching the show from the side, saw the old man leave with his daughter. In this room of dignitaries, he only greeted Secretary Li and ignored everyone else. She secretly stuck out her tongue and whispered, "How bold he is! He even ignored the mayor." Cheng Cheng laughed in a low voice and said, "So what if he's bold? Isn't he still begging Li Yundong?" Feng Na sighed softly and looked at Li Yundong with admiration in her eyes. "When I first saw him at school, I knew that he was not an ordinary person. But now, more than half a year has passed, and he has become a person that I don't even dare to recognize. I wonder what he will become in another 6 months." Cheng Cheng smiled and said, "What else can he do? Is he no longer our classmate or friend after he becomes the President of the United States? Li Yundong is not the kind of person who can't be reached just because he is rich." Feng Na nodded and said with a smile, "That's his charm. Look at the people he's talking to now. You can see that his realm has made us look up to him. But he still doesn't put on any airs and jokes when he wants to." The two of them whispered. At this time, Li Yuanbo, who was upstairs, looked at his watch, then got up and said with a smile, "It's getting late. Today, I've broadened my horizons and watched a good show. This trip was really worth it. I'll go first." As soon as he moved, the guests upstairs all got up to see him off. Li Yuanbo came downstairs, shook hands with Li Yundong, and said with a smile, "Xiao Li, your kung fu is a bit shocking. How did you practice it?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "I was just practicing for fun." Seeing that Li Yundong was unwilling to tell him, Li Yuanbo also smiled and said, "Well, I'll go back and practice blindly. Let's see if I can make any progress." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Haha, Secretary Li, you must be joking." Li Yuanbo laughed and let go of Li Yundong's hand. Then he said to Zhou Qin, who was next to him, "Qin Qin, will you see me off?" Although Zhou Qin was a little surprised, she quickly smiled and said, "Okay, Uncle Li." Li Yuanbo nodded and turned to leave. He didn't get in his car, but just walked slowly on the pedestrian street with his hands behind his back. Seeing that he wasn't getting in the car, the driver who had come with him had to drive slowly behind him. After a while, Li Yuanbo suddenly stopped and played with the file he had taken from Li Yundong. He smiled and said to Zhou Qin meaningfully, "Qin Qin, tell me honestly, what are you learning from Li Yundong?" Zhou Qin was stunned. Although her words were sharp and her mind was quick, she didn't know how to answer for a moment. Li Yuanbo stared at her closely and said, "You don't want to tell me? Well, I'll tell you." Li Yuanbo raised his head and said leisurely, "He's a cultivator, isn't he?" Zhou Qin was shocked. "Uncle Li, are you spying on him?" Li Yuanbo chuckled. "How dare this bold guy play such a trick in front of me? Does he think I can't tell? Zhou Qin asked nervously. Uncle Li, in fact, Li Yundong is not what you think. Li Yuanbui didn't wait for her to finish. He raised his hand and interrupted her, saying, Don't be nervous. I have no prejudice against cultivators. Moreover, the destruction of the 4 olds and the 10 years of turmoil in the country had also caused great damage to the cultivation world. The older generation felt very apologetic, so they had turned a blind eye to the development of the cultivation world over the years. But you have to tell him not to cross the line by playing with fire. Something like young master he must not happen again. Otherwise, no one will be able to protect him. Zhou Qin was relieved and said with a smile, Uncle Li, don't worry. He won't. Li Yuanbui saw that although Li Yundong was young, he was also well-behaved and quite calm. As he spoke, he also let Zhou Qin change the topic to warn Li Yundong. He nodded slightly, smiled, and said, How long have you been with him? This sentence was a little ambiguous. Zhou Qin's cheeks turned slightly red, and she whispered, About a month. Li Yuanbui looked at Zhou Qin and sighed softly. You can cultivate so fast in a month. Has there been such a big change? Zhou Qin looked at herself in a daze. Have I changed a lot? Li Yuanbui shook his head and said with a smile, You really don't know the true face of Mount Lushan. Compared with your former self, it's like you've been reborn. I don't know which sex cultivation method Li Yundong is cultivating. How can he make progress so fast? I met some old comrades and they... At this point, Li Yuanbui suddenly realized that he had said something wrong. He immediately shut his mouth and changed the topic. Hey, don't practice some crooked kung fu with him. Otherwise, I won't be able to explain it to your father. Zhou Qin was a little confused at first, but she quickly reacted. Her cheeks turned red and she said angrily, Uncle Li, how can you be so disrespectful? What are you talking about? Li Yuanbui laughed and said, Forget it. Go ahead and go your own way. Alas, you don't want to take the road of politics, but you want to take such a difficult and dangerous road. Zhou Qin smiled sweetly and said, Uncle Li, as the saying goes, infinite glory lies in the dangerous peak. Moreover, cultivation is the most inspirational thing in the world. There are not so many troubles of intrigue and deception. You can also jump out of the mortal world and get rid of old age, illness, and death. Why not? Li Yuanbui sighed in his heart when he heard this. Yes, if you can jump out of the mortal world and get rid of old age, illness, and death, why not? Zhou Qin saw that Li Yuanbui's temples were gray, which was obviously due to his hard work. She whispered tentatively, Uncle Li, do you want me to secretly teach you some cultivation kung fu in the future? When Li Yuanbui heard this, he immediately waved his hand and said, No, there are rules in the system. We are atheists. You can't hurt me. Anyone who has anything to do with these things will be removed. Those who have anything to do with cultivation are all nominal positions. If people like us have anything to do with it, we will die. Zhou Qin sighed and said, What is this? You might as well not be an official. Li Yuanbui laughed and sighed. It's easy to go up the mountain, but it's difficult to go down. When you climb to a certain height, it's not up to you to decide whether you can go down or not. Forget it, it's getting late. I should go back. As he said this, he turned and walked to his car. Zhou Qin looked at his old back and suddenly asked, Uncle Li, if you had to choose from the beginning, which path would you choose? Li Yuanbui stopped and was silent for a while. He turned around and said with a smile, The affairs of the mortal world are in chaos. How can I be at ease? Envy is returned to herding horses to the southern mountain. After that, Li Yuanbui turned around and left laughing. Zhou Qin chewed over the words, Envy is returned to herding horses to the southern mountain, over and over again. For a moment, she was a little stunned. She thought to herself, It turns out that a high-ranking official like Uncle Li also envies me very much in his heart. == Happy New Year, children. Chapter 420. Go to watch net. When Li Yuanbui's car was far away, Zhou Qin came to her senses and slowly walked back. Watch net. 7K. OM. At this time, Most of the guests in Desanxian had left. Li Yundong saw that the students who had come to support him had all left. At this time, there were only the people from the Fox Zen School, Ziyuan, and the others left in the store. Feng Na, Cheng Cheng, Chao Kefi Lu Feier, and Yin Mengfan, who had stayed for the time being. There were more than a dozen people in total. Although the number of people wasn't small, it was much quieter compared to the situation where the upper and lower floors were filled with people. Li Yundong looked around and saw that after everyone had left, there were leftover fruit peels and shells everywhere on the ground. The teacups on the tea table were messy, and the scene was a mess. Li Yundong clapped his hands to attract everyone's attention. He smiled and said, "Well, the opening ceremony is finally over. Let's clean up later. Maybe there will be more guests coming later." After he finished speaking, Ziyuan took the lead to clean up the teacups on the table. As soon as she moved, Wan Hongling followed suit. Suchan also followed suit. Then, everyone in the Fox Zen School began to move. Feng Na and Chengqing smiled and said, "Let's help too." At this time, only Chao Kefi, Yin Mengfan, and Lu Feier were left sitting at the table with nothing to do. Chao Kefi said awkwardly, "I'll help too." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Forget it, President Chao. Just sit down. You are a guest. How can you be so busy?" Chao Kefi smiled and didn't insist. Lu Feier, who was standing to one side, had been curiously looking at Li Yunyang's belly. Finally, she couldn't help but ask, "Immortally, can I ask you a question?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Okay, but if you ask me where I hid the jar of water, then you'd better not speak." Lu Feier's thoughts were exposed. She immediately said angrily, "You're so annoying. How do you know what I'm going to ask?" Li Yundong laughed heartily. "You've been staring at my stomach all this time. If I still don't understand, then wouldn't I be stupid? Besides, you call me immortal. Of course I have to act like one." In the past, no matter where she went, Lu Feier had always been held in high regard. No matter how outstanding and proud a man was, he had to be polite to her. Li Yundong, on the other hand, had ignored her and even made fun of her. It was really unbearable. Uncle could not bear it, but Aunt could not bear it. Lu Feier was angry and said, "Do you know everything?" Li Yundong had defeated Zhang Ling, and the opening ceremony had been unprecedentedly lively and successful. He was in a good mood. Shaking his head, he said with a smile, "I wouldn't dare. But I know everything about astronomy and English. I know the origin of civilization for 5,000 years, and I know 22 years from now." Li's words Feng Chao and Ian Fei, Luer and Feier Feng, Li Yundong Feng and Fu and Net, Li Yundong Yang Li Net Fei Li and Li and Qing. Fei Li I Yang Li. Do you understand? Li Yundong quickly glanced at Chao Yi and the others. Lu Feier's words made the expressions of Chao Yi and the others change. They all turned their heads, their expressions a little unnatural. He felt strange in his heart, but he asked with a smile, "Sherbwa Chao Yi, do you think President Chao looks familiar?" Chao Yi smiled and said, "Leader is right. When I saw President Chao, I felt that she looked like someone." Zhuang Yiting, who was standing to one side, also smiled and said, "I felt the same way. That's why I kept staring at her. It was rude of me. I hope President Chao doesn't mind." Chao Kefi smiled and said, "Do I look like your friend?" At this time, Lu Yuehong said, "When I looked at President Chao, I felt a sense of déjà vu." At this time, Su Chan also echoed, "Yes, when I first saw President Chao, I also felt the same way." The little foxes of the Fox Zen School also echoed in unison, "Yes, so do we." Chao Kefi was shocked. She unconsciously touched her face and said with a smile, "Really? Who do I look like?" Su Chan shook her head and said, "I don't know, but I just feel that you look very familiar." At this time, Li Yundong also smiled and said, "Sherbwa Chao Yi, you and President Chao both have the same surname. Are you a family?" Chao Yi chuckled and said, 1,000 years ago, we were probably a family." After that, they laughed together. Lu Feier took Chao Kefi's arm and winked at her. "How about it, Sister Chao? I found you a relative. Why don't you thank me?" Chao Kefi smiled and said, "How can I thank you? How about I take you on a 10-day trip to Sanya and Hainan?" Lu Feier's face suddenly fell. Do you want to throw me back into the crew? Humph, no way. Anyway, wherever you go, I will follow you. Don't even think about leaving me behind. If you want to die, let's die together. Chow Kefi laughed and scolded. Bah bah, it's a good opening. What are you talking about? Lu Feier also realized that she had said something wrong. She gently patted her mouth and then said to Li Yundong with a smile. Immortally, I'll punish myself by drinking 3 cups. As she said this, she picked up the small teacup in front of her and drank 3 cups in a row. Li Yundong gave her a thumbs up and said with a smile, You have a great appetite. Lu Feier giggled and pretended to be generous. You flatter me. The two of them laughed, and the grudge between them disappeared. After Lu Feier sat down, she whispered to Chow Kefi, Sister Chow, this person is very interesting. He is capable and interesting. He is much more fun than the guys in our circle. Chow Kefi squinted at her and said with a faint smile, What's wrong? Have you fallen for him? Lu Feier snorted and said, No, there are so many beautiful women around him. How could it be my turn? As she said this, she pointed to Zi Yuan, who had walked up to Li Yundong, and said, Look at this. This is simply the 7 fairies descending to earth. She has such a good temperament, is so beautiful, and is actually so virtuous. Is this Li Yundong the reincarnation of Dong Yong? Chow Kefi also looked at Zi Yuan with jealousy. She did not speak for a long time, and after a long time, she sighed softly. At this time, Zi Yuan whispered to Li Yundong in a voice that only the two of them could hear. Li Yundong, have you found anything strange? The smile on Li Yundong's face didn't change, but he said, I found a little, but I don't know if it's the same as what you found. Zi Yuan said in a low voice. Did you notice that Chow Yi and Zhuang Yuting said that Chow Kefi looked like someone they knew? However, Lu Yuahong and Su Chan said that Chow Kefi was very familiar, but they couldn't tell who she looked like. Don't you think it's a little strange? Li Yundong whispered. It's a little strange, but it doesn't mean anything. What I'm curious about is why Chow Yi and Zhuang Yuting's statements are the same. Zi Yuan thought for a while and said, I don't know. We'll just pay more attention. Li Yundong said, Well, I'll keep an eye on it. However, the most important thing right now is to get Desengxian on the right track. After we solve the problem of making money, we can talk about other things. Zi Yuan smiled and said, Today is a good start. I believe that the business of Desengxian will not be a problem. Li Yundong nodded and said, I'm also confident. The two of them whispered for a while. During this time, Feng Na, Cheng Cheng, and the people of the Fox Zen School had already cleaned up the upstairs and downstairs. Feng Na saw Li Yundong standing to one side and talking to Zi Yuan, so she said with a smile, Li Yundong, are you really an immortal? An idle immortal? Or simply an idler for short? Only then did Li Yundong realize that they had finished their work. He laughed and said, Is it all done? Well, let's get ready to open for business later. As he spoke, Li Yundong walked to the middle of the first floor of the tea house. With one hand on his waist and the other waving, he said energetically, Comrades, today's opening ceremony of Desengxian is grand, successful, perfect, and victorious. On behalf of the chairman of Desengxian International Company, Limited and all the employees, I would like to express my sincere condolences to everyone for their hard work. When he said these words, everyone kept chuckling. Seeing that the opening ceremony of Li Yundong's tea house was so successful, Su Chan beamed with joy, and was the first to take the lead in applauding. The little foxes immediately followed suit. Feng Na and Cheng Cheng also laughed and said loudly, It's not hard on us. The leader has worked hard. Li Yundong was happy. He also pretended to stretch out his hand like a leader, pressed it down and said, Well, although the leader has worked hard, the comrades have worked harder. Seeing that Li Yundong was making fun of them, everyone laughed in unison. Chow Kefi saw Lu Feier holding her cheeks and looking at Su Chan and the others with envy in her eyes. She said softly, Are you jealous? Lu Feier said softly, Well, this person is so fun. I envy them so much. They must live happily every day, unlike me, who has to run around all day and struggle for fame and fortune. Alas, this kind of life may seem very glamorous to others, but in fact it's boring. Li Yundong didn't know what Chao Kefi and Lu Feier were saying. He continued to say seriously, "In view of everyone's good performance today, I have decided to reward you well after today." As soon as he finished speaking, the little foxes raised their hands at the same time and laughed loudly. "Long live the leader!" Su Chan's eyes lit up and she asked, "Are you going out to eat and drink?" The little foxes also asked at once, "Are you going out to buy new clothes? Can I buy a new bag? I want to buy a pair of new shoes." Li Yundong was angry when he heard this. He quickly stretched out his hands and pretended to be angry. "Be asterisk starred. You haven't earned a penny yet, and you're already thinking about how to squander money. How can you do that?" Wan Hongling also joined in and said, "Li Yundong, you just said that you would reward us. Now you're going back on your word. Isn't that too unkind?" The little foxes said in unison, "That's right, it's too unkind." Their crisp shouts made the passers-by outside the shop look in one after another, their eyes full of envy and jealousy. Li Yundong was a little overwhelmed. He turned his head to look at Zi Yuan and glared at her. "Hey, you're also a major shareholder. At least say something." Zi Yuan smiled and said, "What major shareholder? Aren't you afraid of being laughed at in front of President Chao and President Yin? Besides, you said it yourself just now. Don't look at me." Li Yundong said with an exaggerated expression, "You actually defected to the enemy at the last minute. Are you kidding me?" Su Chan and the others burst out laughing. At this time, Zhou Qin also came back. As soon as Li Yundong saw her, he immediately said, "Zhou Qin, you came at the right time. Now that we haven't earned a penny, these girls are thinking about eating and drinking. They even want to buy clothes and bags. Don't you think it's too much?" Zhou Qin was suddenly amused. She said with a smile, "Too much, too much. How can they think about eating, drinking, and wearing clothes when they haven't earned a penny?" Li Yundong was overjoyed and said proudly to the little foxes, "Did you hear that? This is what an experienced strategist would say." Zhou Qin rolled her eyes and said with a smile, "However, when we make money today, we can go eat, drink, and wear clothes again. For eating, we should go to Shangri-La. For dressing, we should go to Chanel V. For dressing, we should go to Cartier Tiffany." Li Yundong gasped when he heard this. "Wow, they're all from the world's top brands. Are you trying to make me go bankrupt?" As he said this, he walked over to Chao Kefi's table, stretched out his hand and said, "President Chao, can I borrow your eyebrow pencil?" Chao Kefi was covering her mouth and snickering. When she saw Li Yundong asking for an eyebrow pencil, she picked up her small bag, rummaged through the makeup bag, and took out an eyebrow pencil. She smiled and said, "What do you want this for?" Li Yundong said angrily, "Just give it to me quickly." When he took the eyebrow pencil, he faced the crowd and used it to draw the position of the 5 internal organs on the clothes. He said with a roguish expression, "How much do you think I can sell for? You can go and spend as much as you think I can. I can also make a contribution to the GP exhibition of our motherland. How about that?" When everyone saw that Li Yundong was acting like a scoundrel, without the slightest immortal demeanor from before, they all laughed. Zi Yuan laughed and scolded, "Look at you. What's the difference between you and a hooligan?" Li Yundong was done joking. He smiled and threw the eyebrow pencil back to Chao Kefi, who was laughing so hard that she was lying on the table. He said, "Forget it, let's stop joking. Let's get to work. If business is good today, I'll treat everyone to delicious food and drinks." Su Chan and the little foxes immediately cheered in unison. "Hooray! We'll have delicious food and drinks." Zhou Qin, who was standing to one side, whispered, "Master, don't you know how much they can eat? Aren't you afraid of going broke?" Li Yundong said with a straight face, "Let's go to the buffet. I'm happy today, so I don't care about my old face anymore." Zhou Qin suddenly burst out laughing. "You shameless girl, but I do. I won't go." Li Yundong scolded her with a smile. "You stinky girl, you're my disciple. Not only did you complain, but you also took the lead in singing the opposite tune. Come on, go do your work. There will be no guests later. I'll see how happy you are." Zhou Qin snorted and said, "Ba ba you jinx. There will be a lot of customers later." Li Yundong laughed and said, Thank you for your kind words. The group of people had enough of the war of words, and they had all finished the opening celebration. At this time, they slowly settled down and prepared to do business. However, after waiting in the shop for a while, Li Yundong and the others saw a bustling crowd outside. There were a lot of people coming in, but no one came in to drink tea. What made Li Yundong even more puzzled was that until the afternoon, not a single customer came in. A few people wanted to come in to drink tea, but after taking a look inside, they immediately turned their heads and left in a hurry, as if the room was full of monsters. However, a few people went in to drink tea at Zhao's tea house, which made Zhao Yuzhen, who had been in a daze, come back to his senses. Li Yundong was puzzled and asked, "Is this salted fish going to turn over? Why is there no one in our shop?" Ziyuan frowned slightly and remained silent. Su Chan and the others also looked at each other confused. Why was there no one in her shop? But there were people in Zhao Yogan's shop opposite. What was the reason? Children, it's New Year's Eve. Happy New Year. I wish all my readers a Happy New Year. May everything go well in the new year. Haha. Chapter 421. Go to see Net. Li Yundong and the others were still immersed in the successful and warm opening ceremony, but they hadn't expected that they would soon be greeted by a scene of sparrows at the door. Go to see Net. Although there were also officials of Tiannan City who had heard the news and come to congratulate them, these people were not guests. After giving gifts, they turned around and left. Li Yundong frowned and said, "What's going on? Why are there no guests?" He looked at Ziyuan and asked, "What happened?" Ziyuan thought for a moment and shook her head. "I don't know yet." Li Yundong looked at Zhou Qin again and asked, "Miss Zhou, do you know?" She shook her head and comforted him. "Master, don't worry. There's no hurry to do business." Li Yundong laughed and said, "You're right, but there shouldn't be no guests at all, right? On the first day of the opening, there are many celebrities from all walks of life, but there isn't a single guest. What's going on?" Lu Feier suddenly raised her hand and said loudly, "Who said there are no guests? Am I not human? Waiter, hurry up and serve tea." Li Yundong turned his face and said to Su Chan with a smile, "I'm calling you. Hurry up and serve tea." She gracefully came to Chow Kefi's table and asked with a sweet smile, "Sisters, what kind of tea would you like?" Lu Feier wanted to tease Li Yundong, so she deliberately said with a straight face, "You are not the waiter. Let the waiter pour tea." Su Chan blinked and looked back at Li Yundong. Li Yundong was so angry that he laughed. It turned out that this girl was still holding a grudge. He snorted and said, "There is no waiter here." Chow Kefi secretly kicked Lu Feier under the table and whispered with a smile, "Hey, don't make trouble." Lu Feier deliberately pretended not to notice. She still raised her face and said leisurely, "Well, no one here knows why business is bad. I'm the only one who knows. It's really embarrassing." Hearing this, Li Yundong immediately trotted over to Lu Feier, bowed, and said with a smile, "Sir, the waiter is here. What would you like to drink?" Everyone burst into laughter. Wan Hongling laughed and scolded, "You're the store manager. How embarrassing." Li Yundong turned his face and said with a fierce face, "What nonsense are you talking about? I'm working hard to make money for you prodigals, aren't I?" After that, he turned his head and said with a face full of smiles, "Sir, don't pay attention to this kind of person. What would you like to drink? I'll prepare it for you right away." Lu Feier tried hard to hold back her laughter. She thought for a moment and said, "I want to drink oolong tea." Li Yundong laughed and said proudly, "We have Da Hong Pao, Tai Luohan white cockscomb, water gold turtle, and Wui cinnamon here. These are all oolong teas. Which one do you want?" Lu Feier opened her mouth and said in surprise, "You have Wui Da Hong Pao here? This is good tea." Li Yundong glanced at Ziyuan and said with a smile, "This is all her credit. I don't dare to take credit for it." Lu Feier rolled her eyes and said seriously, "Well, I want to drink the oolong tea in the market." Li Yundong's smile froze, and he thought to himself, "This girl is playing with me." Chow Kefi, who was standing to one side, smiled and tried to smooth things over. Well, stop fooling around. Hurry up and tell us. Im Mengfan also smiled and said, yes, it's not a good sign to not open for business on the first day. Lu Feier giggled and said, do you want to know why no one is coming? Li Yundong smiled and said, big star, don't keep us guessing. Lu Feier giggled and said, because you just said that there would be no guests. So now it has come true. Su Chan and the others immediately burst out laughing. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Am I such a jinx? Su Chan giggled and said, Yundong, who told you to say that I have a jinx? The other little foxes also joined in. That's right. Li Yundong was a little annoyed. Just as he was smiling bitterly, he heard an old woman's voice coming from the door. Hey, it's really here. Has everyone left? Little magic doctor, I'm late. I'm sorry. Li Yundong looked back and saw an old lady standing at the door. She was wearing a blue cotton-padded jacket with a white bottom and a pair of black cloth shoes. The old lady was hale and hearty, smiling, and holding a gift basket in her hand. She was Old Lady Su, who Li Yundong had once cured her chronic illness and helped Li Yundong settle his appearance. Who else could it be? Li Yundong immediately smiled and said, oh, it's Old Lady Su. Please come in. Zhou Qin also welcomed Old Lady Su into the tea house with a smile and said, Grandma Su, why did you only arrive in the afternoon? Old Lady Su smiled and said, not at all. I came in the morning, but when I saw so many official cars parked here, and all of them were quite powerful, I didn't want to get involved. So I went back, and thought I would come back in the afternoon. As she said this, Old Lady Su smiled at Li Yundong and said, Little magic doctor, you really hide your strength well. I didn't know that you were such a powerful character. Even the #1 car of the provincial party committee is here. Amazing. Li Yundong pointed to Zhou Qin with a smile and said, this is because of her. I don't have the ability to disturb such a great god. Old Lady Su took Zhou Qin's hand and said with a smile, I knew that your daughter was not an ordinary person. She must be the daughter of a rich family. Her speech and behavior are different from ordinary people. Now it seems that she is indeed not ordinary, haha. Zhou Qin smiled and pulled Old Lady Su to sit down. She smiled and said, Grandma Su, please sit. What tea would you like to drink? Old Lady Su waved her hand and said with a smile, I won't sit. I have to go to the opera later. Li Yundong smiled and said, Old Lady Su, since you came in, let's have a drink. At least let me open my shop. After he said this, the people around him laughed softly. Old Lady Su asked curiously, what's wrong? No one came to drink tea? Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, yes, I don't know why. Old Lady Su slapped her thigh and said with a smile, don't you know why? Hey, your shop is too luxurious and classy. Moreover, with so many high-ranking officials and dignitaries coming in this morning, who would dare to come in? What's more? Old Lady Su pointed from Zhou Qin to Su Chan, then to Zi Yuan, one by one, and finally to Lu Feier, Feng Na, and the others. She said with a smile, look at your place. Who in this room is not a great beauty? Although your tea house is small, there are many immortals here. How dare ordinary people come in to drink tea? Hearing this, Li Yundong said with a strange expression, nowadays, isn't there a beauty effect in eyeball economy? Why is it not good to have too many beautiful women? Old Lady Su couldn't stop smiling. She said, but you have too many. Let me count 1, 2, 3. Oh my God, there are 18 beautiful women who are as beautiful as flowers and jade. With so many beautiful women, which ordinary person's legs won't tremble when they come in. They will think, my God, there are so many beautiful women. How much does it cost to have a cup of tea in this shop? I can't afford it. I definitely can't afford it. Old Lady Su's words dispelled all the doubts in Li Yundong's heart. He raised his head and laughed. He clapped his hands and said, it's true that the onlookers see the game more clearly than the onlookers. Li Yundong smiled and said to Zi Yuan, as a living immortal, you didn't expect things to be like this, did you? Zi Yuan pursed her lips and said with a smile, indeed, the older the wiser. Old Lady Su smiled and said, I won't sit. Little magic doctor, I wish you a lot of money and a prosperous business. I'll bring some friends to your place for tea some other day. You have to give me a discount. Li Yundong smiled and said, Okay, sure. Li Yundong sent old lady Sue away with a smile. He turned around and thought for a moment, then simply waved his hand and said, Forget it. Let's not bother about it today. The opening ceremony is already lively enough. We can't expect to make a lot of money on the first day, right? Let's go. Let's call it a day. Lu Feier whispered to Chow Kefi. How can he do business like this in the world? Call it a day in the afternoon. Chow Kefi also smiled and said, How can there be an actor like you in the world? You disappeared while acting? Lu Feier said angrily, Sister Chow, are you helping me or him? Yin Mengfan, who had been silent all this time, suddenly smiled and said, Of course, I value my lover more than my friend. Didn't you see that after she came, she didn't even talk to me? She just stared at her dream lover. Chow Kefi's cheeks turned crimson, and she glared at them angrily. Hey, what are you two talking about? Be careful, or I'll get angry. Yin Mengfan picked up her small bag and said with a smile, I've been sitting with you all day. Forget it, I'll go first. She got up gracefully and came to Zhou Qin's side, saying with a smile, Zhou Qin, I'll go back first. Look for me when you have time in the future. I'll be right there. Zhou Qin smiled slightly and said to Li Yundong, Master, I'll see her off. Li Yundong nodded and said with a smile, Yes, you should. Today, Mr. Yin gave us a good start. Hearing this, Yin Mingfan's heart skipped a beat. She smiled and said, In that case, I'll ask Child Li for a favor some other day. You can't refuse. Li Yundong saw that she had changed to call him Child Li. It was obvious that today's battle had shocked her a lot. He sighed in his heart at the power of power, and said with a smile, If there's anything you need help with, just let me know. Yin Mengfan smiled and said, That's a deal. After that, she walked out with Zhou Qin. Chow Kefi, who was in the shop, also stood up and looked at Li Yundong with a complicated look in her eyes. She said, Hey, we're leaving too. We'll come back for tea another day. Li Yundong smiled and said, Okay, thank you for coming here today. Lu Feier, who was standing to one side, suddenly smiled and said, Sister Chow was filming in Hainan. When she heard the news that you were going to open a shop, she immediately flew back. Chow Kefi immediately glared at Lu Feier, and her ears turned red. She glared at Li Yundong and said, Who told this B***starred not to tell me the news? Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, Are you going back today? Lu Feier said quickly, No, we're staying at the Dihao Hotel today. Would you like to come and play? Sister Chow misses you so much. Chow Kefi covered her mouth angrily and shouted in a low voice, Will you die if you don't speak? As she said this, she pulled Lu Feier out, not daring to look at Li Yundong again. Li Yundong looked over, and saw that Chow Kefi's neck was completely red. As Lu Feier struggled, she turned her head and said with a cheeky smile, Hey, Immortal Li, you have to come. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he watched the two of them leave. When he turned around, he saw Su Chan looking at him suspiciously. Her eyes were rolling, and the others also had ambiguous looks in their eyes. Li Yundong said angrily, Why are you looking at me? I'm innocent. Wan Hongling dragged out her voice and said meaningfully, Oh, you are innocent. Well, I believe that you used to be innocent. Li Yundong said angrily, What do you mean I used to be innocent? I've always been innocent. Li Yundong turned his head and said to the little foxes, Hey, hurry up and say something fair. The little foxes immediately said, Leader, we believe that you are innocent. You are innocent. Li Yundong looked at them with a strange expression. Why do I feel that you are being sarcastic? Wan Hongling chuckled and said in a strange tone, You have a guilty conscience. Li Yundong couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. Su Chan, who was beside him, suddenly took his arm with a smile and said in a coquettish voice, Yundong, I believe that you are innocent. Hearing this, Li Yundong's heart warmed. He smiled and said, My girl is so obedient. Humph girl, I'll take you to eat and drink tonight. I won't take the others to play. As he said this, he held the little girl in his arms and walked out of the door. Wan Hongling was stunned and quickly shouted, Hey, what about the store? Li Yundong didn't even look back. Do as you see fit. Yuan Hongling stamped her feet and said, D***. This person is so annoying. He's actually a hands-off shopkeeper. Sister Ziyuan, what should we do? Ziyuan smiled and turned to walk out the door leisurely. Do as you see fit. Yuan Hongling was dumbfounded. She looked at her Shiji and thought to herself, am I seeing things? When did Sister Ziyuan learn to be a rascal? Could it be that she is influenced by the company she keeps? She hurriedly chased after them, leaving the people of the Fox Zen school looking at each other in dismay. At this time Zhou Qing came back. She looked at Li Yundong's back and asked curiously, where are they going? At this time, the little foxes and the 3 Sherbas were also enlightened and ran out one after another. Only Zhou Qin was left shouting in confusion. Hey, where are you going? Hey, say something. Hey, you don't even want the store? Zhou Qin was so angry that she stamped her feet, quickly locked the door, and quickly chased after them. After eating and drinking outside, the group finally returned home. After Li Yundong returned to his room, he meditated and cleared his mind for a while, then began to think about some of the things that had happened that day. What puzzled him the most was that when he and Zhang Ling were fighting in the air, why had they attracted the heavenly thunder? Logically speaking, there was no cloud in the sky at that time, so it shouldn't have attracted the heavenly thunder. Could it be that someone was coveting it? If so, who could it be? Moreover, if the heavenly thunder was attracted by someone, why didn't it strike at the beginning? Could it be a deterrent to make me and Zhang Ling stop? These questions came one after another, making Li Yundong feel as if he had fallen into a cloud of 800 miles. He sighed softly and said, yes, yes. While he was perplexed and confused, he heard someone knocking on his door. Li Yundong said in a deep voice, please come in. The door creaked and a woman came in. She was tall and beautiful. It was Zhuang Yiting, the 3rd Sherbua of the Fox Zen school. Li Yundong was stunned and asked curiously, 3rd Sherbua, what's the matter? Zhuang Yiting's face was surprisingly serious. She said, Leader, I have something very important to tell you. Li Yundong smiled and said, what's so important that you can't tell me tomorrow? Zhuang Yiting shook her head and said, Leader, I know who the traitor is in our Fox Zen school. Happy year of the rabbit, everyone, haha. Chapter 422. Go to watch net. Hearing Zhuang Yiting's words, Li Yundong was shocked. He immediately stood up, but soon sat down slowly and said calmly, oh, how do you know that there is a traitor in the Fox Zen school? Zhuang Yiting looked worried. She sighed softly and said, Leader, do you think I can't see it? I actually heard what you whispered to Jimren Ziyuan in private. At that time, I kept an eye on it, but I didn't dare to confirm it, so I didn't tell Leader. Go to watch net. 7K. OM. Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, do you know that Ziyuan and I are also suspecting you? Zhuang Yiting nodded and said, yes. That's why I have to prove my innocence. Li Yundong asked, how can you prove your innocence? Zhuang Yiting said in a low voice, Leader, you just need to go to Chao Yi's room and you'll know. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He stood up and said in a low voice, what's wrong with Chao Yi's room? Take me there. Just as he was about to go out, he suddenly heard his cell phone ring loudly. Ever since Feng Na had mentioned him, Li Yundong had brought his cell phone with him again. He picked it up and saw that it was a call from Chao Kefi. Li Yundong felt a little strange. He pressed the answer button and immediately heard a woman shouting in panic. Li Yundong, is that Li Yundong? Li Yundong could hear that the woman's voice was so frightened that it was a little hoarse. He asked in a low voice, who are you? The woman shouted, I'm Lu Feier. Li Yundong, come and help me. Sister Chao has been killed. Li Yundong was shocked. He quickly asked, what's going on? Don't worry. What's the matter? Lu Feier choked with sobs and said, someone wants to kill Sister Chao. Come quickly. Sister Chao is dying. Li Yundong was about to ask for the room number when he heard the beeping sound of the phone being hung up. Li Yundong was shocked and couldn't care less about Zhuang Yiting. He hurried out of the room, went to the balcony, and shouted to the balcony next to him. Ziyuan, Ziyuan. When Ziyuan heard the noise, she rushed over from the balcony and asked curiously, "What happened? Why are you in such a hurry?" Li Yundong said anxiously, "Someone wants to kill Chow Kefi. I'll go and have a look. Call everyone together, and tell them not to move around." Ziyuan was shocked, but she quickly calmed down and nodded. "Don't worry, I'll be here." Li Yundong nodded. He glanced at Zhuang Yuting and said, "We'll talk about this when we get back." With that, he flew into the air and turned into a ray of green light, flying toward the Imperial Hotel. After Li Yundong left, Su Chan also came to the living room in her pajamas. She asked curiously, "Sister Ziyuan, what happened?" Ziyuan smiled faintly and said, "It's nothing. Li Yundong has something to do. Call everyone together first." Although Su Chan was puzzled, she still knocked on the door one by one and called everyone in the Fox Zen school. When she came to Chao Yi's room and knocked on the door for a while, there was no movement inside. Su Chan asked curiously, "Strange, is Chao Yi Shibwa not here?" Zhuang Yuting suddenly sneered and said, "It would be strange if she was here." Su Chan blinked and asked, "Zhuang Yuting Shibwa, how do you know that Chao Yi Shibwa is not here?" Zhuang Yuting snorted coldly and didn't say anything. Su Chan rolled her eyes. She thought for a moment and was about to knock on the door again. But as soon as she raised her hand, the door creaked open. Chao Yi, wearing a loose Taoist robe, came out and asked with a strange look on her face, "What's wrong? What's the matter?" Su Chan smiled and said, "Chao Yi Shibwa, you're here? Third Shibwa said you weren't here." Chao Yi quickly glanced at Zhuang Yuting and said with a smile, "Third Shibwa probably thought I went out." Su Chan smiled and said, "Where can you go so late?" Chao Yi smiled slightly and said, "By the way, it's so late. What's the matter?" Su Chan said, "Leader said that we should all stay in the living room together." Chao Yi asked curiously, "What happened?" Su Chan shook her head and said, "I don't know. I only heard him say that." Chao Yi nodded and said, "Since leader has instructed me, I will naturally do as he says." With that, she went downstairs with a smile. When Chao Yi passed by, Su Chan's nose suddenly twitched slightly and she sniffed. The little girl suddenly thought to herself, "Strange. Why is there a smell of blood on 6 Shibwa?" The little girl felt strange in her heart and unconsciously chased after Chao Yi for 2 steps, trying to determine whether the smell was real or not. As soon as she chased after her, Chao Yi immediately turned around and looked at her suspiciously. "Chana, what's wrong with you?" Su Chan was keenly aware of Chao Yi's abnormal sensitivity at this moment. She immediately smiled and said, "It's nothing. I'll go to the other side and call the other Shiji." As she said this, she quickly walked past Chao Yi. As she passed by, she sniffed again and smelled a faint smell of blood. Su Chan was extremely proud of her sense of smell. She knew that it was impossible for her to smell wrong twice in a row. She was shocked and thought to herself, where did the smell of blood on Chao Yi Shibwa come from? While Su Chan was making wild guesses, Li Yundong had already arrived at the Dihao Hotel. He didn't wait for him to get close to the hotel. Instead, he picked a place where there was no one around and landed. Then, he rushed toward the entrance of the hotel. Along the way, Li Yundong was secretly anxious. He knew that Chow Kefi had done him a favor. It was somewhat unjustifiable that he had disappeared without saying a word. He felt a little guilty in his heart, so his pace became faster and faster. Gradually, he was like a galloping horse. Especially when he was crossing the road, he didn't even look at the speeding cars on both sides. Like a spirit monkey, he jumped from one end of the road to the other in just a few leaps. Li Yundong jumped easily, but the drivers were unlucky. They saw a figure fly over their car with a few flashes. It was so agile that it didn't look like a human being. They were shocked and turned their heads to look at the person. In the blink of an eye, the road was filled with people chasing after him. After a while, the road was completely blocked. Li Yundong couldn't care less about the movement behind him. He dialed Chow Kefi's number to ask for the specific room number, while he rushed into the hotel quickly. The security guard in the hotel, who was wearing a white shirt and black trousers, saw Li Yundong's nervous expression and hurried footsteps. He was secretly suspicious. Immediately, One of them came up and asked, "Sir, please wait. Please show me your ID." Li Yundong held the phone in one hand and touched it with the other. He was immediately stunned and said, "I didn't bring it." The security guard said in a deep voice, "Then you can't go in." Li Yundong took the phone and said to the security guard, "Something happened to my friend. If you don't believe me, you can listen to it." The security guard looked at him suspiciously. He took the phone and listened for a while, but soon returned it to him and said, "It's busy." Li Yundong was anxious. "I just dialed it. What's going on?" "Hello, something happened to my friend." The security guard shook his head and said stubbornly, "No, you can't go in." Li Yundong was annoyed. Saving people is like putting out a fire. "Are you going to let me in or not?" The security guard sneered and said, "What happened? I'll go and save her. But you can't go in." Li Yundong said angrily, "If I knew where she was, I wouldn't talk nonsense with you." After that, he pushed the security guard and said angrily, "Get out of my way." Li Yundong's strength was actually comparable to that of an ordinary person. With his push, the security guard suddenly flew out. The security guards on both sides of the hall saw that the situation was not good. They immediately called the police, drew their batons, and surrounded Li Yundong from all directions. Li Yundong snorted angrily and went straight to the front desk. On the way, the security guards who approached him raised their hands and flew out without saying a word. The guests in the hall saw that these powerful security guards were immediately thrown out as soon as they got close to Li Yundong. The farthest one flew more than 10 meters away, as if he was on a plane. They were all stunned and stood where they were dumbfounded. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly, for fear that they would provoke this devil and make him come to them. That would be very bad. The lady at the front desk was desperately pressing the alarm bell under the counter with one hand and holding it tightly with the other. Her body kept shaking, but she still kept a strange professional smile on her face. Li Yundong rushed to the front desk and saw that the poor girl was so scared that she couldn't even stand steadily. He was stunned for a moment, but his expression soon eased a little. He asked in a low voice, "Is there a person named Chow Kefi staying in your hotel?" Seeing that Li Yundong's expression had eased, the lady at the front desk also subconsciously relaxed a little. She thought to herself, "This man is quite handsome, but I'm afraid he's here to seek revenge. He's not a good person." So she boldly shook her head and said, "No, no." Li Yundong suddenly became furious. "You didn't even check and you said no? What the hell? She just called and said that she was here. Hurry up and check. Tell me as soon as you find out." Li Yundong's roar made even cultivators have to be in awe, let alone this young and beautiful lady at the front desk. The lady at the front desk suddenly shivered all over, and her hands quickly flew over the keyboard. While she was searching, she saw a security guard behind Li Yundong boldly throw the electric baton in his hand at Li Yundong. Without looking back, Li Yundong grabbed the electric baton with his hand. As soon as he held the electric baton, the lady at the front desk and the security guard were overjoyed. They all knew that this electric baton could instantly release a high voltage of tens of thousands of volts, which could instantly make people tremble and lose their ability to move. But as soon as the smiles appeared on their faces, they suddenly froze. They saw Li Yundong holding the electric baton and staring at the security guard who had attacked him behind him. He didn't say a word, but he was not angry. The security guard was stunned for a moment. He thought that he had not pressed the switch, so he pressed the switch a few more times. He only heard the crackling sound of the electric baton, but Li Yundong did not move at all. He stared at him like an insulated stone man. Li Yundong was not in the mood to deal with these people. He suppressed his anger and shouted in a low voice, "Have you had enough?" The security guard immediately let go of the electric baton, raised his hands, and looked at Li Yundong with fear, as if he were looking at a devil. Li Yundong glared at him, slapped the baton on the front desk and shouted, "Have you found it?" At this time, the smile on the lady at the front desk had not faded. Her expression was scared, and her smile became uglier than crying. She said in fear, "In room 35. Without saying a word, Li Yundong turned his head and ran upstairs. No one in the hall dared to stop him. A group of people looked at his figure in a daze, motionless. After Li Yundong left, the lady at the front desk picked up the electric baton and looked at it curiously. She pressed the switch and saw that the electric baton was still crackling. She muttered to herself, "Impossible, why didn't the electric shock hit him? Could it be a low-quality product?" Several of the ladies at the front desk, who were also frightened, came to their senses and said angrily, "It must be a low-quality product. Otherwise, how could he be fine after touching it?" The lady at the front desk who had answered Li Yundong tentatively touched the security guard, who was holding the counter with the electric baton. As soon as the security guard's hand came into contact with the electric spark, he was immediately electrocuted and fell to the ground. He looked like a lunatic, foaming at the corner of his mouth. At this time, the ladies at the front desk came to their senses. It turned out that it was not that the electric baton was useless, but that the guy just now was not a human at all. Chapter 423. Go to Watch Network. Li Yundong didn't wait for the elevator to come down. He ran up the stairs by himself. In a short while he rushed to the 19th floor. Before he could find Chow Kefi and Lu Feier's room, he shouted in the corridor, "President Chow, President Chow! Lu Feier, where are you?" Li Yundong's shout alarmed the entire floor. Some curious people leaned out of the door and muttered to themselves, "Lu Feier? Is it that big star Lu Feier?" While they were guessing, they saw a door suddenly open, and a girl ran out. She was wearing a bathrobe, and her hair was disheveled. She waved at Li Yundong with a panicked expression and shouted, "Li Yundong, I'm here. President Chow is dying. Come quickly." Li Yundong immediately rushed toward her and asked anxiously, "What's going on? Where's President Chow?" Lu Feier didn't care that she had been discovered. She pulled Li Yundong and pointed to the room. Her voice was filled with fear and a strong sob. She said, "I don't know what's going on. When I came out of the shower, Chow was like this." Li Yundong walked into the room and saw that it was a spacious and luxurious double room. The double room was equipped with all kinds of appliances, and it was also equipped with a bathroom and a balcony. 7K. OM. The floor-to-ceiling windows of the balcony were open, and the curtains fluttered gently in the night wind outside. The bedside lamp between the two beds was slightly lit, and the faint light outlined Chow Kefi's figure. She was lying on a bed, her eyes closed, her hands tightly covering her chest, and her face full of pain. Li Yundong rushed to her side and felt her pulse with his hand. He found that her pulse was extremely weak, almost as if it didn't exist. Li Yundong tried her breathing with his hand again and found that she was completely out of breath. Li Yundong's heart tightened. He asked in a deep voice, "Do you know that President Chow has heart disease?" Lu Feier saw that Li Yundong's expression was calm and composed. She was slightly relieved and said, "I know." Li Yundong asked, "Then why didn't you give her medicine?" Lu Feier said with tears in her eyes, "I did, but she couldn't swallow it. I gave her water, but it was useless." Li Yundong frowned. "Have you called 110 yet? Where's 120? Lu Feier wiped her tears and shook her head. "No, when I came out, Sister Chow was still conscious. I saw her clutching her chest in pain, so I thought she had a heart attack. I quickly found medicine for her. After I fed it to her, she struggled and said that someone wanted to kill her. She asked me to find you quickly and said that you could save her." Li Yundong frowned. He saw that there was not only a pool of water beside Chow Kefi, but also a few drops of blood not far away. He dipped one hand in the blood and sniffed it. He pressed Chow Kefi's pulse with the other hand and asked in a deep voice, "Did she say who wanted to kill her?" Lu Feier shook her head. "Did you see the murderer?" Li Yundong asked. Lu Feier shook her head desperately. Her eyes were full of fear as if to say, "If I saw it, wouldn't I be lying here too?" Li Yundong thought for a moment and asked, "Do you have any enemies?" Lu Feier shook her head and said, "No." Li Yundong said, "Think about it. I mean some very special enemies like me who have a little special ability." Lu Feier couldn't help but sob again. Sister Chow is usually kind to others. How could she have any enemies? Li Yundong asked. But didn't I see someone collect a debt from her last time? Lu Feier said. Sister Chow has already paid off that debt. Li Yundong fell silent. He slowly transferred Yuanyang Qi to Chow Kefi's body, trying to help her hang on to the last breath of life. He asked again. No, didn't you come back to Tiannan City in private? Who else knows your whereabouts? Lu Feier said bitterly. The crew may know that we returned to Tiannan City, but they shouldn't know where we live. Li Yundong frowned. He was about to ask again when he saw Lu Feier suddenly sob. Hurry up and save President Chow. Can you save her? Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, Don't worry, she's fine, but... Li Yundong was about to tell her about Chow Kefi's current situation, when he suddenly heard a noise coming from outside. What? Lu Feier is here? Where? Where? The tourists outside were alarmed. When some fans heard about Lu Feier's whereabouts, they immediately surrounded her and craned their heads to look around at the door. Some people pointed at Lu Feier's figure and shouted, Yes, it's Lu Feier. Lu Feier, I love you. Lu Feier, give me an autograph. I love watching your movies and TV shows. Lu Feier had dealt with countless fans, but obviously, she had never dealt with her own fans in such a situation. She was stunned for a moment, at a loss, and didn't know what to do. If she agreed, they would destroy the scene if they came in. Moreover, how could she deal with these fanatical fans in such a situation? But if she didn't agree, if the matter got out, there would be unfavorable news and gossip about her. Lu Feier's face was dull. She stood like a clay puppet, watching the fans rush toward her like a tide. Just as she was about to be surrounded by these fans, Li Yundong suddenly shouted in a deep voice, Stop! Although this low shout was not loud, it was full of majesty and power, causing these fans to stop in their tracks and stand still. They looked in the direction of the voice, and saw a young man squatting by the bed, looking at them coldly, like a lion looking down at 100 beasts. His face was indifferent, and there was no expression on his face, but between his eyebrows, there was a natural pressure that came from not being angry. Li Yundong said angrily, Someone is going to die here. Didn't you notice? Get out of here. If someone dies, will you be responsible? Only then did these people come to their senses. They looked at the beautiful Chow Kefi lying on the bed, and then at the panicked Lu Feier. Finally, their eyes fell on the young and handsome Li Yundong. Countless imaginative stories suddenly appeared in their minds, and then countless erotic and ambiguous gossip and anecdotes emerged. Chinese people loved to join in on the fun. When these guys saw such a fascinating thing happening at this time, they immediately became excited. Although they didn't dare to go forward, they didn't retreat either. One by one, they piled up at the door and excitedly took pictures with their mobile phones. Li Yundong frowned and said to Lu Feier in a deep voice, Drive them all out. Lu Feier was stunned and asked, What? Li Yundong glared at her and said, Do you want President Chow to die? Hurry up and drive them all out. Lu Feier seemed to wake up from a dream. She begged the crowd, Could you please make way? I'll definitely sign autographs for you later. These people all smiled and promised, but their feet seemed to be rooted to the ground, and they didn't move at all. Lu Feier was so anxious that tears welled up in her eyes. She was about to speak again, when she suddenly heard a woman shouting her name outside. Lu Feier was stunned and subconsciously shouted, Sister Hong? I'm here. After a while, a tall woman wearing a black professional suit and a pair of black-rimmed glasses squeezed in from the crowd. The moment the woman saw Lu Feier, her face immediately revealed a strong expression of anger. However, she looked left and right, then forcefully suppressed her anger. She just walked up to Lu Feier and said in a low voice, Feier, you've gone too far this time. How dare you sneak away from the crew? Do you know how bad the impact is? Now the whole crew is saying that you're acting like a big shot. When Lu Feier saw that the woman was her agent, Sister Hong, she immediately rushed over, as if she had seen her savior. She took her hand and asked in surprise, Sister Hong, how did you find me? Seeing that she didn't answer her question, Sister Hong snorted coldly and temporarily put the previous matter behind her. I have my own way, but where is Chow Kefi? How could she be such a B****? It's fine if she ran away by herself, But why did she drag you away? Where is she? Lu Feier pointed at Chow Kefi, who was lying on the bed with a worried expression, and said sadly, "Someone wants to kill Sister Chow. She's dying now." Sister Hong was shocked, but she still said rudely, "This woman is the best at causing trouble. Humph, this is her retribution." Lu Feier pulled her arm and whispered, "Sister Hong, don't say anything. I wanted to come out with Sister Chow. It's not her fault." Sister Hong glared at her and said, "You're still speaking for her." Lu Feier's tears were about to fall again. She choked and said, "Don't say anything. If you want to scold someone, scold me. It's all my fault that Sister Chow ended up like this." The anger between Sister Hong's eyebrows dissipated a little. She glanced at Li Yundong, who was concentrating on transferring Jinqi to Chow Kefi, and asked, "Who is this person?" Lu Feier whispered, "Sister Chow's friend." Sister Hong frowned. "What friend?" Lu Feier hesitated for a moment before saying, "Just an ordinary friend." Sister Hong asked, "Is he a doctor?" Lu Feier was tongue-tied. "I don't know." Sister Hong frowned. She said to Li Yundong, "Hey, are you a doctor?" Li Yundong didn't even turn his head as he said lightly, "No." Sister Hong suddenly said angrily, "If you're not a doctor, what are you doing here? Do you know that it will kill someone? When Chow Kefi really dies, who will be responsible for it? You or someone else? Hey, say something. Hurry up and get out of the way. If you're not a doctor, what are you doing? Hey. Li Yundong tilted his head slightly, glanced at the agent lightly, and said, "Then why don't you find someone else to treat her?" Hearing this, Sister Hong was stunned, but soon she became angry and said, "Who do you think you are? How dare you talk to me like this?" She quickly took out her mobile phone from her bag and said angrily to Lu Feier, "Did you call the ambulance?" Lu Feier was sandwiched in the middle. She looked at Li Yundong in a dilemma, and then at her agent. She shook her head helplessly. Sister Hong glared at her fiercely. Just as she was about to make the call, she suddenly heard someone shouting outside, "I'm a doctor, I'm a doctor." Sister Hong was overjoyed when she heard this. She shoved the phone into Lu Feier's hand and said quickly, "Hurry up and call the ambulance. Don't let this unknown guy make things worse. If we don't manage to save him, we'll all be in trouble." As she spoke, she quickly walked up to the crowd and shouted, "Who is the doctor?" At this time, a tall young man walked out of the crowd and said with a smile, "I'm a doctor." As he said this, he took out his certificate from his pocket and said, "This is my medical certificate." Sister Hong glanced at it and asked in surprise, "You graduated from Harvard University?" The young man quickly glanced at Lu Feier, then quickly hid his astonished eyes carefully. He said with a smile, "Yes, I'm a doctor of pharmacology and neurology at Harvard University. Now I'm working at North Carolina State Hospital. I know a little about medicine, so I think I can help." Sister Hong suddenly showed a big smile on her face. She giggled and said, "You only know a little about medicine? Haha, you're really modest. Unlike some people who pretend to know what they don't know and cause trouble." As she said this, Sister Hong turned her head and glared at Li Yundong. The young man smiled and asked in a gentlemanly manner, "Can I go in and have a look?" The agent, Sister Hong, quickly made way for him and said with a smile, Of course. The young man walked to Li Yundong's side and unconsciously glanced at Lu Feier. He coughed and asked, "Hello, can I have a look? I'm a doctor, a professional doctor." Li Yundong looked up at him and asked lightly, "Do you know what's going on with her now? Is she alive or dead?" The young man suddenly became angry. He thought to himself, "You're obviously not a doctor. Why are you pretending? Is it possible that I, a double doctor who graduated from Harvard Medical School, am inferior to a Mongolian doctor like you? Who do you think you are? How dare you be so arrogant in front of me? You're really reciting filial piety in front of Confucius and playing tricks in front of Guan Yu." There were a lot of social engagements, so the update was late. Sorry. Chapter 424. Go to watch net. Li Yundong's casual words were meant to test the other party's medical skills. But for the proud and arrogant young Ritterni, He felt a little choked. Watch net. 7K. OM. He was so angry that he subconsciously wanted to refute. But as soon as the words were about to come out of his mouth, he became alert. He secretly glanced at Lu Feier and thought, this bastard has no manners. I'm a top student from Harvard University in the United States. I can't lower myself to his level. The young returee straightened his clothes and asked with a polite smile on his face, if you don't let me see, how do I know if she's alive or dead? Beside him, his agent Sister Hong looked at him and secretly praised him. As expected of someone who has been educated abroad, he is really well educated. As she thought about it, she couldn't help but roll her eyes at Li Yundong and think to herself, unlike some Chinese people, they really have no manners. It clearly had nothing to do with him. Yet he insisted on getting involved. Could it be that he didn't know that he was the one who got involved and lost his face? Li Yundong glanced at the young returnee and suddenly asked, what's your surname? There was a hint of arrogance and superiority in the young returnee's reserved manner. He was like a city man who had seen the world looking at a rustic country bumpkin. He said, my name is Howard D. Smith. Li Yundong smiled and said, well, Mr. Shi, since you are a doctor, come and have a look. The proud and reserved smile on Mr. Shi's face suddenly froze. He blurted out, it's Mr. Smith, not Mr. Shi. Li Yundong nodded with a smile and said, I know Mr. Shi. Lu Feier, who was standing to one side, saw Li Yundong teasing the fake foreigner. For some reason, she suddenly thought of Li Yundong's appearance as a waiter in the tea house, and suddenly burst into laughter. When she smiled, both the fake foreigner and her agent Sister Hong looked at her in surprise, as if they didn't understand how she could still smile in such a situation. Lu Feier also realized that there was something wrong with her. She quickly turned her face away and lowered her head. Her face was tense, as if her mother had died, but her eyes kept slipping over to Li Yundong's face from time to time. Although she had been very scared and flustered, she found that Li Yundong had been very calm, especially in this situation. He could even make fun of this fake foreign devil, with a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. He must have a way, right? Even though she hadn't known Li Yundong for a long time, Lu Feier always felt that there was an inexplicable power in this boy that made her feel at ease. Mr. Shi was a little embarrassed by Lu Feier's sneer. He stared at Li Yundong unkindly and said, I'm a doctor. Let me see her condition. Li Yundong let go of one of Chow Kefi's hands and said, please. The fake foreigner frowned and said, I'm not a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner. I don't know how to feel a pulse. Li Yundong looked at him strangely. Western medicine also feels the pulse on the wrist. Don't you know how to do it? The fake foreigner's face turned a little red. He glared at Li Yundong and reached out to touch the main artery on Chow Kefi's neck. After feeling it for a while, he suddenly exclaimed, God, she has no pulse. Li Yundong suddenly laughed. God, so you know how to feel a pulse? The fake foreigner said angrily. Are you making fun of me? This person has no pulse. We need to do chest compressions and artificial respiration as soon as possible. The smile on Li Yundong's face slowly disappeared. He looked at the fake foreigner with a little sympathy and said, forget it, Mr. Shi. Let me do it. You can't do it. When the fake foreigner heard this, he immediately forgot his manners. He said angrily, what did you say? I can't do it? I have a double doctorate in medicine from Harvard University. What are you? Do you have a medical qualification? Do you know how to treat diseases and save people? This is a life, and you can't afford it. Get out of the way. If you don't know medicine, don't make trouble. The agent, Sister Hong, also said to Li Yundong with a cold face, hey, you, get out of the way. Why can't you talk sense? Summer insects can't talk about ice. Do you know what medicine is? Do you know what's going on with Chow Kefi? She was born with heart disease. Get out of the way. If she really dies, you will have to bear criminal responsibility. The fake foreigner also threatened, if you don't get out of the way, you will be responsible for the safety of this person's life. You will spend the rest of your life in prison. Li Yundong glanced at him and sighed helplessly. You think you know it very well. But do you know what's going on with her? The fake foreigner sneered and said, are you deaf? Didn't you hear that it's a heart attack? Heart disease needs to be treated as soon as possible, and the room needs to be ventilated. Now her heart has stopped beating. 1 more second of delay is a kind of murder. Li Yundong shook his head and said, "No, she doesn't have a heart attack." The fake foreigner laughed and said, "Then what is it?" Li Yundong's hand still did not let go of Chow Kefi's wrist. He kept sending Yuanyang qi into her body to maintain the vitality in her body. He said, "I just found that Chow Kefi's innate soul is missing. Normal people have 3 souls and 7 spirits, but she only has 1 soul and 3 spirits. It is precisely because of the congenital lack of soul that she has a congenital lack of qi and blood, which leads to her heart disease. Furthermore, the rest of her soul has already been scattered by someone. Her soul is currently wandering outside, causing her physical body to have almost no life force." When Li Yundong said this, the agent, Sister Hong, and the fake foreigner couldn't help laughing. Sister Hong laughed and said, "I'm dying of laughter. What era are we in? There are actually people who talk about such superstitious things. 3 souls and 7 spirits. What a joke. You don't know medicine, but you really don't know it. How dare you fool us with such things that can fool children? Hey, then tell me, which soul and 3 spirits does Chow Kefi have?" Li Yundong didn't seem to notice Sister Hong's sarcasm and mockery. He said seriously, "The 3 souls of a person are the heaven soul, the earth soul, and the life soul. There are 7 spirits. The first spirit is Tianchong, the second spirit is wisdom, the third spirit is qi, the fourth spirit is strength, the fifth spirit is the center, the sixth spirit is the essence, and the 7th spirit is the spirit." Among the 3 souls, Chow Kefi only had the life soul before. The heaven soul and the earth soul were not in her body. Among the 7 spirits, the qi, the power, the essence, the heroic, and the 4 spirits were not in her body. Sister Hong sneered and said, "You actually said it so logically. It's a pity that summer insects can't talk about ice. I didn't know that you were so young. But why are you more superstitious than an old man?" The fake foreigner couldn't help but sneer and say, "Hey, are you still living in the Qing dynasty? Where's your braid?" Li Yundong was furious in his heart. In the past, if Li Yundong had used all his strength to glare at the person in front of him, he would have been able to make his heart beat violently and make him spit out a mouthful of blood. But at this time, not only had Li Yundong's cultivation improved, but his temperament had also slowly been tempered. He just glanced at the fake foreigner lightly. Although it was just a faint glance, Li Yundong, who had experienced several battles and all kinds of hardships, had already cultivated a dignified aura. The fake foreigner's laughter was choked in his throat, and he didn't dare to say anything more. Li Yundong didn't bother to pay any more attention to him and the manager. He let go of Chow Kefi's wrist and placed his palm on the Baihui acupoint on the top of Chow Kefi's head. His other hand reached out and unbuttoned Chow Kefi's collar, revealing a large area of snow-white skin. Seeing this, Sister Hong couldn't help but ask angrily, "What do you want to do?" The fake foreigner looked at the attractive ravine on Chow Kefi's chest and couldn't help but feel a little dazzled for a moment. However, when he heard Sister Hong's scolding, he immediately came to his senses. He took a step forward and asked like a parrot, "What are you doing?" Li Yundong didn't look back. He snorted and said, "Watch carefully." As he said this, all the Jinqi in his body rushed from his palm to Chow Kefi's body. His other hand was like a butterfly flying through flowers, and his 5 fingers quickly poked at various acupoints on Chow Kefi's chest. The fake foreigner wanted to step forward to stop Li Yundong, but he was shocked by Li Yundong's power and didn't dare to move forward. The same was true for Sister Hong. She turned her head and said angrily to Lu Feier in a low voice, "Where did this man come from? How did he know you were here?" Lu Feier was speechless. Seeing this, Sister Hong couldn't help but say angrily, "Did you call him here?" Seeing that she couldn't hide it anymore, Lu Feier bit her lip and nodded gently. Sister Hong suddenly went crazy and said angrily, "How did you know such a person? Did Chow Kefi introduce you to him? Why did you think of calling him here?" Lu Feier quickly explained, "No, Sister Hong. It was President Chow who asked me to find him. Moreover, he is very powerful, really very powerful. I saw it with my own eyes. Sister Hong suddenly turned around, pointed at Li Yundong, and said angrily, "Is that so? Playing tricks like a witch?" As she spoke, she saw Li Yundong's palm press on Chow Kefi's head. He didn't seem to exert much force, but Chow Kefi slowly stood up by herself. However, her eyes were still closed, her face was as thin as paper, and her skin was frighteningly pale, without a trace of blood. For a moment, Sister Hong was a little tongue-tied, and the people watching at the door also stirred. They whispered, "Hey, it's a little magical. F***CK, are you for real? What's going on? Is this a movie?" Lu Feier also widened her eyes and looked at the scene in front of her with excitement. At this time, she was already convinced that this master, who had been praised by Chow Kefi, must be a powerful guy. He must be able to save Chow Kefi. Lu Feier couldn't help but take Sister Hong's hand and whisper excitedly, "Sister Hong, look. I told you that he's amazing." Sister Hong couldn't help but say angrily, "Bullshit. This is not magic. This is superstition. This is pretending to be mysterious." She pointed at the people watching at the door and said loudly, "Tell me, do you believe it yourself? What era is this? Why are you still doing this? This kind of person will be sentenced if he is arrested." While she was talking loudly, Li Yundong suddenly shouted hum and ha in the room, followed by a third shout. "Chow Kefi, the soul has returned. The soul has returned." In the blink of an eye, everyone saw that the curtain on the balcony was suddenly raised high, and Chow Kefi's body trembled violently. Not long after, Chow Kefi let out a groan, and her long eyelashes gently trembled as she slowly woke up. The crowd suddenly burst into an uproar. The fake foreigner was dumbfounded, and his eyeballs almost fell out. He couldn't understand how this woman, who had no pulse just now, could come back to life in the blink of an eye without any medical treatment. Sister Hong stared at Chow Kefi dumbfoundedly, unable to say a word. Li Yundong supported Chow Kefi with one hand and leaned her against the bed. Then, he glanced at the fake foreigner faintly and said, "I can understand that you, a foreigner in China's skin, don't understand all this." As he said this, he turned to look at Sister Hong and shook his head slightly. "But as a Chinese, you blindly think that the things of our ancestors are dregs and superstitions. I can't understand this." Sister Hong's face suddenly became very ugly. She opened her mouth and was about to retort, but she heard Li Yundong sigh again. "Alas, but you are right about one thing." Sister Hong asked subconsciously, "What is it?" Li Yundong said meaningfully, "You can't talk about ice in summer. Ah. Children, I'm sorry, but the internet in my house is 7 to 9, and it automatically disconnects at 9 p.m. Last night, I forgot to update it, and it was already past 9 p.m., so I didn't have time to update the second chapter. Vote for recommendation previous page. Next page error report if you like. Please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your personal views. Chapter 425. Go to Watch Network. Li Yundong's words made Sister Hong's face turn red. Her eyes were full of shame and anger, but she had no way to refute Li Yundong. After all, Chow Kefi, who had almost died before, had been saved by this young man in the blink of an eye. After all, no matter how eloquent she was, she couldn't defeat the hard facts. Go to see. 7K. OM. On the other hand, the fake foreign devil was very unconvinced and snorted, "What good luck. Next time, you won't be so lucky." Li Yundong glanced at him and smiled. He was too lazy to argue with him. He turned his head and whispered to Chow Kefi, "President Chow, how do you feel?" Chow Kefi frowned slightly. She covered her heart with one hand, as if Shizi was holding her heart. She forced a smile and said softly, "Li Yundong, you saved my life again. What can I do to repay you?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Look at what you're saying. We're friends. Don't say that." "Friends? Chow Kefi's plump red lips gently spat out 3 words. She looked at Li Yundong with blurred and complicated eyes, as if she had thousands of words to say, but she didn't know where to start. At this time, Lu Feier also rushed over and grabbed Chow Kefi's hand tightly. Her face was covered with tears, and she shouted in a sobbing tone, "Sister Chow, you finally woke up. You scared me to death." Chow Kefi smiled and said, "Yes, I just dreamed that I was flying. I flew very high, very far. When I was flying in the sky, I suddenly seemed to hear someone calling my name. I couldn't help flying back. When I opened my eyes again, I woke up." Lu Feier smiled through her tears and said, "It was Li Yundong who called your soul back just now." Li Yundong smiled and said, "By the way, President Chow, do you know what's going on?" As he said this, he lowered his voice and asked, "Who on earth wants to kill you?" A look of fear suddenly flashed in Chow Kefi's eyes. She opened her mouth and was about to speak when she suddenly heard a noise coming from outside. Someone shouted in the corridor, "Get out of the way, get out of the way." The people who had been blocking the entrance turned their heads to look and immediately dispersed. Li Yundong and Chow Kefi turned their heads and saw several policemen barging in shouting, "Where are the criminals?" Several security guards behind them saw Li Yundong at a glance. They immediately pointed and shouted, "That's him. Many of us were injured." Li Yundong smiled and asked, "You said that I hurt a lot of your people. May I ask who I hurt?" Several security guards said at the same time, We were all injured." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Where is the injury? Can I have a look?" The security guards were stunned. They subconsciously touched their bodies and found that there was no wound on them. Although they had been thrown far away by Li Yundong like a kite, they didn't feel much pain when they fell to the ground. At that time, they were so nervous and scared that they didn't notice these things. Now that they were pointed at by Li Yundong, they were surprised to find that they were not injured at all. The originally aggressive security guards suddenly relaxed. The leading policeman snorted coldly and shouted, "It's not up to you to decide whether or not he was injured." Li Yundong asked, "Then who has the final say?" Another policeman sneered and said, "Nonsense, of course it's up to us to say." Li Yundong laughed and said, "So you mean that it's up to you to say whether you hurt them or not? Even if you didn't hurt them, you can say that you hurt them?" When the policeman heard this, he couldn't help but say angrily, "What do you mean by that? Be careful, or I'll arrest you for slander." Li Yundong glanced at the two of them and shook his head secretly. He thought for a moment and said to the security guards, "Tonight was actually a misunderstanding. I was in a hurry to save my friend, but you stopped me from going, so there was some conflict. If possible, I'm willing to settle this matter privately." At this time, a lobby manager in a suit and leather shoes walked out of the crowd. He snorted coldly and said, "Settle it privately? Do you know how bad the impact of this matter on our Dihao building is? No, this matter must not be settled privately." The two policemen were also very cooperative. One of them took a step closer and stared at Li Yundong covetously, while the other took out a pair of handcuffs from his arms and showed them. Sister Hong and the fake foreigner immediately gloated in their hearts. They shouted in their hearts, "Catch him, catch him." Seeing that things were not going well, Chow Kefi endured the discomfort and said loudly, "I can testify that he did come to save me. Is it against the law to save someone?" A policeman said coldly, "If you hurt someone in the process of saving someone, it's also against the law." Chow Kefi couldn't help but say angrily, "The law is nothing more than human feelings. How can you be so heartless? Nowadays, law enforcement needs to be humane. How do you enforce the law? Who is your leader?" When the policeman saw Chow Kefi's angry expression, he was stunned for a moment, and his saliva almost fell down. When he came to his senses, he shouted with a straight face, "Don't talk nonsense. Come with us." Chow Kefi was shocked and angry, but she was also a person who had seen big scenes. She forcibly suppressed her anger and began to look through her mobile phone quietly. The other policeman who came with him had better eyesight than his companion. Seeing that Chow Kefi's temperament was different from ordinary people, he hesitated for a moment. He felt that this matter could be big or small, but if it was really big, if the other party had a very strong background, then he, a small policeman, would not be able to bear the consequences. He turned to the lobby manager behind him and whispered a few words to him. The lobby manager snorted. He thought for a moment and was about to speak when he suddenly heard a dignified voice not far away. "Xiao Lu, what are you doing here?" The policeman named Xiao Lu turned his head and saw a middle-aged man in casual clothes looking at him majestically. He was shocked and trotted over quickly. He saluted respectfully and said loudly, "Director Gong, I'm on a mission." Director Gong frowned and said, "What kind of mission is it? Take me to have a look." Xiao Lu smiled apologetically and said, "It's just a small matter. How can it be worth your time?" Director Gong snorted and said, "It's just a small matter, but it's so big. If it's really a big matter, are you going to tear the earth apart?" As he spoke, Director Gong put his hands behind his back and walked through the corridor like a beast king patrolling the mountains. The people who had been watching the fun in the corridor made way for him in awe. The lobby manager's face was full of smiles at this time. He took out a pack of cigarettes from nowhere and handed it over with a smile. "Director Gong, I'm really sorry to disturb your rest." "I'm sorry. I'll ask someone to send you 2 late-night snacks later." Director Gong pushed away the cigarette in his hand with a righteous expression and said in a deep voice, "I don't smoke. What the hell is going on here?" The lobby manager said with a smile, "In fact, it's nothing much. It's just that someone broke into our Dihao hotel and hurt someone. Now these 2 policemen are going to arrest him." Director Gong snorted and said, "So arrogant? Dihao is one of the few 5-star hotels in Tiannan City. How dare they act so recklessly? Is there any law or regulation in this person's eyes? They must be severely punished." The lobby manager smiled even more brightly. "Director Gong is wise. Well said. This kind of wind can't be allowed to continue. Otherwise, the face of Dihao will be lost, and so will your face, won't it?" Director Gong shouted with a straight face, "Nonsense. What does my face have to do with Dihao?" The lobby manager's smile did not diminish, but he sneered in his heart. Continue pretending. So much money is paid to you every year, and you continue to pretend." Director Gong pretended to inspect the place. Another policeman, who had originally advocated arresting the suspect, also came over at this time and saluted. "Director Gong, this suspect has an accomplice. Should we arrest them together?" Director Gong looked at the policeman and nodded. "It's Xiaozhang. What, this suspect has an accomplice? Arrest them all. We can't let go of any of the suspects and accomplices." Xiaozhang was overjoyed. He turned around and was about to go into the room to arrest the suspect. But suddenly he heard Director Gong ask, "Is the suspect inside? Who is so arrogant?" Xiaozhang quickly turned around and welcomed Director Gong into the room. Then he pointed at Li Yundong and shouted, "This person is the suspect." Director Gong took a closer look and saw that the boy was looking at him coldly. Not only was there no fear or uneasiness in his eyes, but they were full of mockery and disdain. He subconsciously became angry in his heart, but soon he found that the person in front of him seemed to be a little familiar. He was shocked and carefully looked at Li Yundong with his eyes wide open. Director Gong looked at him for a long time and asked tentatively, "Are you Li Yundong?" Li Yundong was stunned. "Do you know me?" Director Gong's face suddenly burst into an extremely bright smile. It was hard for others to imagine that his middle-aged face, which had been full of dignity and coldness just a moment ago, could burst into a cheerful smile like that of a baby. He rushed over quickly, grabbed Li Yundong's hand tightly with both hands, shook it up and down with all his might, and said loudly, "Child Li is really forgetful. We just met during the day. I went to your tea house when it opened." At this time, the people inside and outside the room were all sweating, especially the policeman, Xiaozhang, who had clamored to arrest him. He was sweating profusely, and his whole body was stiff, as if he were sitting on wax. Sister Hong and the fake foreigner, who had been gloating and wanted to watch the fun, looked at Li Yundong with their mouths agape, as if they were looking at a visitor from outer space. When Li Yundong opened the tea house today, there were at least 70 or 80 celebrities from all walks of life. Just the names and official positions of these people made him dizzy. How could he remember who the middle-aged man in front of him was? But when Li Yundong saw that the other party was so enthusiastic, and the smile on his face was as bright as a sunflower, he couldn't lose his temper. As the saying goes, don't hit a smiling person, right? Li Yundong pretended to be suddenly enlightened. He smiled and said, "Ah, I remember. I'm so sorry. Hello, Director Gong." Director Gong smiled very warmly. He asked knowingly, "Why are you here today, Child Li?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "I came to save a friend, but there was a misunderstanding with Di Hao." As he said this, he glanced at the policeman who had clamored to arrest him. As soon as Li Yundong's gaze swept over the place, the people there immediately broke out in a cold sweat, especially the lobby manager, who refused to settle the matter privately. He secretly regretted it so much that he wanted to slap himself in the face. What kind of background could make the director of the city's public security bureau so close to him? And even with some flattery, what kind of background could he have? He had provoked such a devil. How could he survive in Tiannan City? Chapter 426. Go to watch net. While the lobby manager was thinking about how to deal with the situation, Director Gong asked the two policemen behind him loudly, "Are you here to arrest Child Li?" The policeman named Xiao Zhang was tongue-tied. His forehead was covered with beads of sweat that kept rolling down. His tongue seemed to be tied, and he couldn't speak. The other policeman named Xiao Lu was obviously much smarter. He said loudly, "Director, we are here to understand the situation." Director Gong glanced at him and was secretly satisfied with his alertness and response. He nodded and said, "Well, how is the situation?" Xiao Lu couldn't help but sweat rolling down his body. He looked at Chao Kefi and then at Li Yundong, complaining to himself, "Oh my God, how can I take back what I just said? Isn't this like slapping myself in the face?" But when his eyes fell on the lobby manager, he suddenly had an idea. "I got it. My friend in the Tao will die, but I won't. I found a scapegoat." Xiao Lu pointed to the lobby manager and said loudly, "Manager Wang knows the best. Let him speak." Manager Wang was so angry that he almost cursed out loud. "Motherf asterisk cur. It's fine that you often come to my place to catch a few prostitutes. How dare you frame me? You really can't be trusted." But as angry as he was, he still had to say something. Manager Wang wiped the sweat from his forehead and said in a hollow voice, "In fact, it's just a small misunderstanding. Child Li is just eager to save people. Haha, it's okay. It's just a small matter." As he spoke, he suddenly thought of something and thought to himself, "Damn it, if these two stinky policemen can push this kind of trouble to me, can't I push it to someone else?" As he said this, he turned his head and shouted at the security guards behind him, "Are you injured or not?" The security guards were dumbfounded. They hadn't expected that such a big responsibility would be thrown to them one after another. They secretly cursed, but the lobby manager was the brother-in-law of the new mistress of the chairman of Di Hao. No matter how much they complained, they didn't dare to offend him. Go to watch net. The security guards all said with sad faces, "No, we're not injured at all." Manager Wang said angrily, "If you're not injured, why are you shouting? The flood nearly destroyed the Dragon King temple." These security guards were so aggrieved that they were about to cry. They all drooped their heads and dared not speak up. Seeing this, Li Yundong also said, "It's not their fault. It's my fault. Just let it go." Unexpectedly, Director Gong suddenly shouted, "No, we can't go there like this." At this time, everyone couldn't help but look at the chameleon director strangely. They thought to themselves, "Is this director going crazy again and going to enforce the law impartially?" Director Gong said righteously, "Child Li, you came to Di Hao to save people at such a late hour. What kind of spirit is this?" This was a spirit of abandoning oneself and forgetting others. This was a chivalrous spirit. This is a kind of dedication that is missing in our current society. This spirit must be vigorously propagated and carried forward. I want everyone in Tiannan City to know young Master Li's chivalrous heart. When he said this, almost all the people around him almost vomited on the spot. They all looked at Director Gong strangely and thought to themselves, You were the one who said that you would arrest people before. Now you don't want to arrest them, but you're actually flattering them shamelessly. It's too disgusting, isn't it? Chowie couldn't help but look at the director of the Public Security Bureau with disdain and spit in her heart. Everyone loved flattery, and even Li Yundong was no exception. However, Li Yundong was a little overwhelmed by this kind of heavyweight flattery. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, "Director Gong, there's no need for that, is there?" Director Gong thought that Li Yundong was pretending to be polite, so he dragged his voice and said, "Hey, Child Li, what are you talking about? How can you not use it? This is a great opportunity to publicize and educate the general public." Li Yundong smiled bitterly in his heart and muttered in his heart, "I guess that after you finish the publicity, I will become a spoiled brat in the eyes of the general public." Li Yundong quickly waved his hand and said, No, there's really no need. Keep a low profile. You have to keep a low profile." Director Gong suddenly understood and said with admiration, "After all, Child Li's realm is high. I admire you." Li Yundong smiled dryly and said, "No, Director Gong, you're too polite. I have one thing I want to ask Director Gong for help with." After that, he whispered a few words in Director Gong's ear. When Director Gong heard this, he was immediately overjoyed. He patted his chest and said, "This is a small matter, no problem. When do you want this report, Child Li? I'll send it to you." Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, "You'd better give it to me as soon as possible. In addition, as for today's matter, I can settle it with Manager Wang in private. There's no need to involve so many people in these things." Li Yundong's words were unintentional, but both Director Gong and Manager Wang were listening attentively. Director Gong laughed and said, "Well, you guys have a good agreement. If there's any bad agreement, Child Li, you can come to me." As he said this, he glanced at Manager Wang intentionally or unintentionally. Manager Wang suddenly shivered and gritted his teeth with hatred in his heart. "Damn it, Director Gong is threatening me. F***CK, I'm going to bleed again today. I just don't know how big this Child Li's appetite is." Thinking of this, Manager Wang clenched his trouser pocket tightly. He forced a smile on his face and said to Li Yundong, "Child Li, can I have a word with you?" Li Yundong nodded and walked to a deserted place in the corridor with Manager Wang. Just as Li Yundong was about to speak, Manager Wang rushed to say, "Child Li, I know that I didn't recognize Mount Tai today and offended you. Please be merciful and let me live. How much do you want? Name a price. As long as I can afford it, I'll send it over without hesitation." When Li Yundong heard this, he was stunned and thought to himself, "No way. It was obviously me who caused trouble. How did it become him paying me?" Manager Wang's heart trembled when he saw Li Yundong's blank expression. He gritted his teeth and said, "Child Li, 100,000 yuan. 100,000 yuan. What do you think?" Li Yundong was shocked and thought to himself, "Damn it, such a small matter can be worth 100,000 yuan? Is this more powerful than extortion?" Manager Wang saw that Li Yundong still didn't speak, and his heart was bleeding with hatred. He said again, "Child Li, it's not easy for us to do business. Please give us 200,000 yuan. What do you think?" At this time, Li Yundong saw that Manager Wang's eyes were bloodshot, and his eyes were so ferocious that he seemed to want to sell his mother. He quickly shook his head and said, No, I didn't mean that." Manager Wang's face turned pale, and he cried in his heart, "Damn it, what do you mean? You don't want money. What do you want? The woman around you is so beautiful, and you have a big star. I don't think I need to find a woman for you. You don't want money. You don't want women. What do you want? By the way, didn't Director Gong say that he opened a tea house before? Yes, it must be like this. Child Li is probably afraid of leaving something behind, so he must be counting on me to buy his tea house voucher. Humph, what a wishful thinking." Manager Wang's heart skipped a beat and he said, "Child Li, I know that you opened a tea house. How about I use public funds to buy your tea house voucher of 200,000 yuan every year?" Li Yundong was dumbfounded. He thought to himself, "Is this guy out of his mind? Does he have too much money to spend?" Manager Wang saw that Li Yundong still didn't speak, and thought that Li Yundong wouldn't agree, so he asked tentatively, How about 300,000 yuan? Young Master Li, please say something. Oh, I beg you, 400,000 yuan. 400,000 yuan, no more. If it's more, I won't be able to explain. Only then did Li Yundong come to his senses. He had a strange expression on his face and thought to himself, does this guy think I'm a rich second generation who wants to rip me off? Manager Wang's heart trembled when he saw Li Yundong's strange expression. He suddenly gritted his teeth and said, 500,000 yuan, Child Li, I'm very sincere. Please say something. Li Yundong saw that Manager Wang was about to go crazy. If he didn't say anything, he was afraid that this guy would want to dig his ancestors' graves. He quickly said, don't add it anymore. Manager Wang finally let out a sigh of relief. At this time, he only wanted to send this god of plague away as soon as possible. He couldn't care about anything else now. Manager Wang immediately said, Child Li, a gentleman's word is as fast as a whip. I'll send someone to your tea house tomorrow to settle this matter. You can rest assured that I won't dare to lie to you. Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, No, it's not that. Manager Wang trembled with fear. His legs trembled and he thought to himself, what else can this man do? Oh my God, I'd better run away quickly. I can't afford to offend him, can't I? Manager Wang didn't wait for Li Yundong to speak again. He grabbed Li Yundong's hand and shook it twice. It's a deal, Child Li, he said loudly. I'll go deal with other things first. I'll come back later to apologize. After that, he turned around and ran away, as if the back of his pants was on fire. Li Yundong was stunned on the spot. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he said, Damn it, am I that scary? Why can't I be a good person these days? But on second thought, he couldn't help but sigh at the power of worldly power. A misunderstanding could solve the business problem of the tea house. This was equivalent to signing a business order of 500,000 yuan. Should I accept the money or not? Li Yundong couldn't help but smile bitterly for a moment. Just as he was hesitating about whether to return the money or not, he suddenly heard Chow Kefi calling his name behind him. Li Yundong looked back and saw that Chow Kefi was wearing a fur coat, which made her look elegant and extraordinary. She looked at him with a lazy and charming face and said with a smile, What are you daydreaming about? I've called you several times. Li Yundong came to his senses and said with a smile without thinking, I was thinking that it's really strange recently. Wherever I go, I can meet people I know. Chow Kefi looked at Li Yundong, and for a moment, her eyes were a little dazed. In her impression, this boy was still young and inexperienced a few months ago. Although he had all kinds of magical abilities, he was still an ordinary person after all, and she could even look down on him. But now, she had to stand on her tiptoes and look up to see him. How could a person climb so fast? How high could he climb in the future? Thinking of this, Chow Kefi couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. She sighed faintly and said, Everyone in the world knows me. Li Yundong was stunned. He didn't know Chow Kefi's thoughts as a woman. He only felt that her words were full of sarcasm and mockery. Li Yundong recalled these words and couldn't help but laugh out loud. Who in the world doesn't know the king? After laughing for a while, he noticed that Chow Kefi was carrying a bag in her hand. Lu Feier and her agent Sister Hong were also standing next to her, as if they were going out. He asked curiously, Where are you going? Chow Kefi smiled and said, So many things have happened, and Lu Feier's whereabouts have been discovered by the fans. We have to go back to Sanya as soon as possible. Li Yundong smiled and said, Then be careful on the way. Sister Hong, who was standing to one side, looked at Li Yundong strangely. After experiencing these things, she no longer dared to glare at Li Yundong. Lu Feier looked at Li Yundong with some reluctance. She waved her hand and smiled sweetly. Hey, Immortal Li, I'll go first. When you have time, you can come to the crew to see me. Li Yundong smiled and waved his hand. Okay, I'll go back when I'm free. Speaking of this, Li Yundong suddenly said to Chow Kefi, By the way, President Chow, can you stay for 2 or 3 days and do me a favor? Chow Kefi didn't want to leave, but she couldn't find a reason to stay. When she heard Li Yundong's words, she immediately beamed with joy and said without hesitation, Okay. Lu Feier snorted. You only care about the opposite sex. Sister Chow, you've gone too far. I'm ignoring you. Chow Kefi smiled and pinched her cheek. Well, I'll compensate you when we go back. Be good. The crew is waiting for you to go back to film. They can't do it without you, but it doesn't matter without me. Lu Feier snorted and Sister Hong, who was next to her, also tried to persuade her. Feier, listen to President Chow. You really should go back. Do you want to stay and see the headlines of the entertainment section of Tian'an Daily tomorrow? Only then did Lu Feier say resentfully. Well, you two don't have to sing a duet. I know. After that, she got into the elevator with flagging interest. After watching her and her agent disappear from his sight, Li Yundong whispered a few words to Chow Kefi. Hearing this, Chow Kefi was slightly shocked and blurted out. You want me to continue pretending to be dead? Li Yundong smiled and said, No, so many people have seen that you're not dead. I just want you to continue pretending to be half dead. Chow Kefi asked curiously, Why? Li Yundong smiled confidently. It's very simple. Don't you want to know who wants to kill you? Humph, this is called inviting the enemy to enter the urn. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.